right. Thank you so much for coming in today. We're so excited to have you. By a show of hands, who is here today from outside of SF? Wow. Keep your hands up if you had to take a flight to get here today. Where are you coming from? Just shout it out. DC? Wow, North Carolina. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. Well, give yourself a round of applause. This is so special. Thank you. My name is Haidar. It is such a pleasure to meet all of you. I'm one of the fellows here at Transform VC, and I come from a background of business development and go-to-market. I've worked at some really great companies like Intuitive Surgical, Evaluate Pharma, and a few other brands. But for me, the thing that's always been missing professionally was making a genuine, meaningful impact. And that's what I found at Transform. And I know that's why many of you are here today, whether you're a founder, a fellow, audience member, an investor. It is just so special to have us all under one roof today. And as we go through the panels today and the keynotes where we talk about some real raw perspectives about what it means to mind the gap, I challenge every single one of us in this room to not let the ideas die down with us, but that we go out in the world and plant a seed or two and nurture it, because if we're all a little bit more mindful of these gaps, I'm confident that the world will look completely different when we meet next year. So I'm just going to jump in. I just want to give a big shout out to our sponsor, Riggs Davey. They're a law firm that specializes in business, all things business, mergers, acquisitions, venture capital. So they're a big part of why we were able to do this today. So please, if you need anything of that sort, reach out to them. So if you notice, there's a brochure on all of your chairs when you walked in. If you open that brochure, there's a QR code in there. If you scan that QR code, you'll be taken to a document that's going to have all of our founders, a little snippet about their companies, what their impact focus is, and you'll be able to connect with them directly on LinkedIn. Okay, now, without further ado, please help me welcome to the stage to help us kick off this year's AGM, Rama and Raed.
Welcome, everyone. We're really excited to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us, both the folks in the room and the folks online. So our theme this year is Mind the Gap, which is a warning that's issued to railway passengers in the UK, cautioning them for the crossing into the train. For many of us, this past year has been a roller coaster of wild gaps in logic and sensibility. I don't know about you, but I'm really excited about putting an end to this year as a chapter. It's been rough. But with Transform VC, we chose this theme specifically because it represents the new era of technology that, if it's inclusive or exclusive, it has very big impact. And so with Transform, we're trying to address these gaps in our industry, the ones that are born out of our industry and the ones that are within it. So we invest in founders who are building deep tech that solves for social, climate, or economic gaps. And these gaps are absolutely huge. We all know them, we felt them. And so to address them, we aim to invest in at least 1,000 tech founders who would each impact $1 billion and make $1 billion. Now, we know that this is an ambitious goal, but we are able to do it because of our community. Now, our community is small. We represent only 1% of the United States of America, but the community is rich with scientists, engineers, and doctors. We are also deeply connected, and we're anchored in values. Those are 3 great recipes for success. But in addition, if we have the right plan in the coming decades, and through an investment in technology, we can have great financial, social, and climate justice, both in the US and abroad. Who's with me on that? Yeah, great. Last year at our AGM, we hosted Mr. James Lowry. He's the author of Change Agent. the Manifesto for Economic Empowerment of Minorities in America. Now, Raed and I have spent the last 4 years building Transform to address gaps that Mr. James Lowry identified in his 10-point plan. And we've adopted 7 out of these 10, and hopefully we'll adopt the rest. Here they are. First, we must accept that those who control the capital control the country. So as a capital aggregator and allocator, we are investing in our community to benefit ourselves and benefit others. Second, working collectively, we must create as many billion-dollar businesses as possible that are founded by members of our community who hold our values dear. This is what we do, and as an emerging manager, Transform VC has already reached a top 10% financial performance, and that's recognized by a third-party auditor. Thank you. Third, leaders in the C-suite must leverage their clout to grow minority business enterprise programs. Ourselves, just a small little Transform, we've made over 100 introductions with C-suite executives that are supporting our founders and other members of our community, and we hope everybody else does the same. Fourth, we must form strategic relationships with influential and global leaders. We've started doing that by building a tech corridor with leadership in the Middle East that hold our values dear. And as well as leadership in the US. And together, we're addressing employment, funding, and policy gaps. Fifth, we must support well-managed nonprofits that are building from the ground up to lift the most vulnerable members of our community. Through Impact a Billion, an initiative that we've started, we've reached over 300 nonprofits in the US and started connecting them to tech founders in our ecosystem who are helping them scale. And sixth, we have to rely on data and conduct a lot of research to make sure that we're anchored in the right industries and in the right trends. You'll hear from Raed and our fellow moderators an emphasis on data and our data-driven approach in the business. And last, number 7, we have to stop the crabs in the barrel mentality. We rise by lifting others. Only when we collaborate will we be able to reach our objective. So what we do is even when we don't invest in founders, we make sure we give them feedback, we connect them with other VCs, and help empower them, because every single founder counts. So we'll be hearing today from members of our community who are addressing gaps in music. Man is in the room. Next, and digital advertising with Rembrandt and Omar Tawakkol. You'll also hear from portfolio company founders who are addressing national security, nutritional, farming, and energy gaps. And you'll hear from leaders in the foundational AI and cybersecurity who are building the next generation AI infrastructure. And they're having too much fun doing it. This is Amr Awadallah mocking around with some new LLM that he either built or figured out how to use to create fun images of himself. And last but not least, you will hear from the talented fellows who, without them, this event would not have been possible. They represent our founder demographics, and they are the rising VCs and tech founders who do all the research, who identify the founders, and who help us assess the folks that we will invest in. So the gaps are opportunities for technology to address, to be able to build a more sustainable nature, and to grow our societies with care. Today, we invite you to explore these gaps with us, challenge us on our assumptions, and help us reach this impactful goal that we have of investing in at least 1,000 tech founders from our community. And with that, I thank you again for being here, and I'll hand it over to Raed.
All right, awesome. So as you know, most of us here are from the Middle East. And when you think of Middle Eastern people, oftentimes you might think villain, or you might think victim. But more frequently than not, you're probably thinking crazy rich Arabs. So as Rama said, Middle Easterns in America and Canada, or North America, we represent approximately 1% of the population. So how can this 1% help America live up to her own aspiration? We believe Silicon Valley is the best place in the world, but it's really quite insular. We think the answer is in partnering with other underrepresented community groups and help them be successful in every way, shape, or form. When we are successful, not if, our founders are gonna create an impact and a dent at the national level. So at Transform VC, we invest in these underrepresented founders that are innovating across sectors. And oftentimes they face the very challenges in their own communities that they're trying to solve with their deep tech that has these software profit margins that we love so much. So as some of you know, both Rama and myself were serial entrepreneurs. We've started SaaS companies, AI companies, telecom networks. As investors, have experience as angel investors, VC allocators, institutional limited partners, evaluated 300 managers, invested in 11. And we feel quite privileged that our track records got top decile performance, both in the past, but also in the current fund that we're deploying out of. Our thesis is it's been long perceived to get impact, you gotta sacrifice returns, or to get returns, you gotta sacrifice impact. So we're grateful that we've demonstrated time and again our ability to do both. And our impact criteria is we look at the founder, are they underrepresented? And underrepresented doesn't only mean black, brown, female. It could mean someone who comes from an underprivileged community. We've got a founder who's a product of the foster care system. Very powerful experience and motive. And we look at the business outcome. We ask our founders in our side letter to select a single impact measure that they can track over time with intent to improve on it. And it doesn't matter if it's zero for a while or a long while, so long as there's an intent to improve on that metric over time. And of course, the team and the hiring practices. Does the entrepreneur or that startup look at hiring people from underprivileged or overlooked communities? To generate that outlier returns, of course, we need the deep tech, something that's not easily replicable, complex engineering, AI, advanced materials, network effects, the most important concept since the internet was invented, and of course, that 10x advantage. And we've done quite all right. As you can see, Fund 1, we deployed $26 million already in DPI, meaning we've generated actual dollars, and it's marked at 3x. Fund 2, the fund that we're currently deploying out of, and there's an opportunity to accept new partners, is already marked at over 3x. And like Brahma mentioned, we just conducted a financial audit, so we're pretty proud about that. Our differentiators are twofold. One, impact a billion. A values-based community and network. Like I said, Silicon Valley is the best place in the world to build a startup, but it's really quite insular. So we take Silicon Valley in a roadshow across the inner cities of America and Canada, identify overlooked talent, help that talent crack Silicon Valley in weeks instead of years on their own. And two, our fellows, mid-career professionals, very diverse, ethnically, skills-wise, geographically. They represent the demographics of the very founders we want to back. And it's our way of bringing diversity to the VC sector. They help us operate like a much larger firm than we are, giving us at least 300 hours plus per week. And here's an example. Just in the last 12 months, over 100 investor introductions, over 60 customer introductions, and over, this number is stale, over 50 other support activities, media, webinar, pitch review, what have you. And particularly because of our fellows, just over the last year, as you can see, a hockey stick shape in terms of the value creation activities. We've been really able to scale our operations. And not only we track the value creation activities we do for our founders, we also track the value creation activities we help the ecosystem, people that we may not have invested in, or maybe we'll never invest in. We still want to help them because we want to rise by helping others. So in terms of the fund itself, it's a $50 million fund. We try to come in at that pre-seed or seed with a $750K and try to own 5 to 15%. And then at the Series A, we'd like to invest $2 million to protect our ownership or buy more. And the fund parameters are really quite plain vanilla. Like I said, Fund 2 is already marked at over 3x after investing in 16 transactions across 10 companies. This will become, all being well next week, 11 companies and 17 transactions. Some companies in Fund 2, and I bring these up today because the founders are unable to be with us due to illness or travel, include Hassan. He's the founder of Explain. It's a low-code, no-code development environment for AI that allows anyone, and I really mean anyone, to build, architect, deploy AI systems and solutions with zero AI expertise. And then Hanad Youssef with Juvena, which is an AI that produces new therapeutics that solve for weight loss without muscle loss, and generally age-related chronic illnesses. So everyone's investing in AI. Transform VC is a firm that is investing in impactful AI and mobilizing a global community to embrace it. Thank you so much, and Haider, I'll ask you back to the stage.
All right. Let's see. All right, I'll just use this. Well, let's give Rama and Rayad another hand. Great job. And, you know, you all have been such a good crowd. Also, just really appreciate that. And Rayad, I want to second that point. I do think the fellowship is, you know, a unique, the kind of the secret sauce of Transform. And I'm not just saying that because I am one of the fellows. So thank you for highlighting that. Now I just want to introduce the next two folks that are going to be coming up and introducing themselves and then getting and teeing up the next panel. So Yusra and Ahmed, please come to the stage.
Hi, I'm Yusra.
And I'm Ahmed, and we both from Gaza, Palestine.
I was the first female fellow at Transform and working in venture capital while in Gaza.
With the support of VIB Fund, Transform VC team, and Impact A Billion community, we made it out safely from Gaza to Cairo in April and started our MBA program at Guilford College in North Carolina.
The gap I am addressing is to support the women like me who grow up in difficult circumstances and want to start their own businesses and venture in the world of investments.
I grew up dreaming to be a pilot in a place there is no any airport. So, as a computer engineer, I'm planning to address this gap for others and hope one day to create my own airport.
It's my pleasure to introduce the next panel, Media Gaps and How to Address Them. Jad, Ghazi, and Omar, please join me on stage. Thank you.
Hello. Lots of people. Hello, everyone. Hope you've all recovered from yesterday's tsunami. And to everyone here in San Francisco, thank you for coming. And to everyone online, thank you for tuning in. We promise to make it worth your while. So my name is Jad. I'm from Syria, and I've been with Transform for a little over 2 years now. My background is in media and data, and hence why I'll be moderating the media panel today. To get things kicked off, by a show of hands, who here agrees with our panel's quote, "Whoever controls the media controls the mind"? I might join you as well and raise my hand. At Transform VC, we couldn't agree more. This is why we're investing in and empowering founders of our community to create a more equitable media landscape. But here's the challenge. While everyone has the right to consume media, not everyone has the right to create it. Media consumption might be democratized, but the decisions determining what content thrives and what content gets buried down are made by a handful of CEOs. CEOs who you might not be able to distinguish from one another, given their shared backgrounds, incentives, and worldviews. This concentration of power fuels the bias that we see in today's media every single day. This bias is even more amplified in today's youth. Today's youth are discovering the world through their screens. The average teenager in America spends 50% of their waking time on their phone. That is 50% of their conscious time immersed in a stream of content that has been filtered through systems created by leaders who do not think or know or even look like them. And this is why at Transform VC, we believe in a future where everyone has a voice in the media, where bias is challenged and equity is fostered. And with that, allow me to introduce two founders from our community who embody this mission. Omar Tawakkol, co-founder and CEO of Rembrandt, and Ghazi Shami, founder of Empire. All right. So you're both on our first panel, the media gap. And I'll start with Omar from Rembrandt. If you can just introduce yourself, introduce Rembrandt, and what are you building?
Awesome. Honored to be here. I'll just start with a question in terms of what we're building. So when you guys watch videos at home, do you guys watch any Netflix or Amazon Prime or any of those? Show of hands, yeah? Cool. And when you see a skip button on a YouTube ad, does anybody click it? Yeah. People hate interruptive ads so much they literally pay money to avoid them. And I come from the ad industry. I grew up in it and watched it grow into something huge. So our whole mission in life is to stop interruptive ads by placing brands in the content you love so that you can enjoy it without any interruption. And we do this with AI to get attention for the brand and to get a much better experience for the consumer.
Great. And if we were to follow today's theme of minding the gap, what gap do you think is Rembrandt filling?
Well, I mean, if you step back to what you're talking about, there are 50 million creators in the world. And one of the problems that you see in content creation in the media industry and just in general, talent is universally distributed, but opportunity is not universally distributed. It's very localized. And so what we're trying to do is to make it so that any creator anywhere can monetize and make money off of their talent with the marketplace that we're creating that's global.
Great. And if we make a switch to you, Ghazi, can you tell us about Empire and what inspired you to start?
There was a gap. Literally, there was a gap in the culture, and there was a gap in opportunity that we capitalized on. And it was literally to service underserviced creative community, much like what he's saying. So I always had a mantra that access creates culture. You create access, you create culture, you inhibit the access, you inhibit the culture. I work in the music business. It embodies the spirit of the word culture. And so we wanted to reduce friction and allow creators to get into the marketplace faster and to monetize faster.
And in terms of your business, so can you give us a bit on what does Empire do?
Yeah, a brief synopsis. Empire started as a distribution company. So essentially in an era and time where it was hard to distribute music onto the digital service providers like Apple and Amazon, Spotify, so on and so forth, we were one of the first people in the space, or one of the first companies, not people, in the space to provide that level of access. And then fast forward many years later, we've evolved into a publisher, a record label, a merchandising company, and we've started to fill in many of the other gaps that a lot of creatives suffer lack of infrastructure in. So, you know, we started to add layers of publicity, radio, touring, digital marketing, A&R support, production, and then we built a global footprint across the world. Now there's 250 employees in the company, and they're distributed across the world. The headquarters is here in San Francisco, where I grew up.
That's amazing. Great to hear. And in terms of your business, so I think similar to venture capital, your business relies on picking up early potential and backing winners. What would you say your secret sauce is to ensure that your screening process is the best? And what have you learned through iterating on your screening process?
You know, I'm somebody that's very rooted in an era of data, and which I'm a firm believer in data. I'm also a person that's firmly rooted in authenticity. So I've spent most of my life in the music business since I was 14 years old, and a significant portion of that in tech as well, in my teenage years and into my early 20s. And so mentally, I have a unique cross-section of where science and creativity meet. And somewhere in the middle of that is how you make a lot of those decisions. I have teams of individuals that work alongside me that understand the data. I have teams of individuals alongside me that understand the culture. And then there's only a very few people that understand that cross-section and how to bridge it together, and that's the leadership of the company. And so we have a very nuanced approach into how we do things in an age where people primarily chase only data. So it's a, you know, it's
data-driven music.
I wouldn't say it's data-driven music. I would say it's culture-driven music that's validated by data. The data validates your gut. It doesn't define your gut. The gut only comes with many, many, many years of wisdom, right? You could look at two artists in front of you and you can say, this artist is streaming 1 million streams a week, and this artist is streaming 1 million streams a week. But I know culturally there's something significant about artist A that's not happening with artist B. And that's not something you can quantify in a spreadsheet. Culture can't be quantified in a spreadsheet. But culture can validate, or excuse me, a spreadsheet can validate culture after it explodes, right? So I interviewed a data scientist recently, and we were having a conversation, and I said, what do you primarily work on in your current position? And he said, I measure sentiment on social media is primarily what I do. And I said, well, I don't need you to do that for me. And he said, I don't understand. I said, my company creates the sentiment on social media. I don't need you to quantify what I'm creating. I want you to tell me how to magnify what it is that I'm creating. We need to start at the top of the funnel, not at the bottom of the funnel. And so it was very unique for somebody like him to understand that's just sitting there and on the receiving end of data all day and saying, we don't want to be on the receiving end. We want to be on the front end of creating trends. We want to create culture. We want people to follow the things that we're creating. We don't want to follow what the general public follows. Then you're not how are you a record label?
Yeah.
You know, like, how are you a creative? That's just more of the same. We're not trying to do more of the same. We're trying to be on the front end of change. Not only as a record label, but also in many other segments, in terms of like the diversity of the company, the diversity of the different markets that we work in, where we sign artists. We approach a lot of the same metrics that it had spoke about earlier, going into areas where people are underrepresented. So we're signing artists out of Ghana, Nigeria, Mozambique, Angola, Indonesia. I'm working on a deal in Cambodia right now. I flew out to Cambodia a couple months ago and spent time there, Korea, all over the Middle East, from Jordan to Palestine, Lebanon, Morocco, Egypt, Algeria, all through Latin America, so on and so forth. So going into places where typically a US organization not only wouldn't touch it, not only wouldn't be aware of it, but probably, honestly, excuse my language, probably doesn't give a fuck about it.
All right, thank you. Very thoughtful answer of you.
Yeah.
Back to you, Omar. So from what I understand, it looks like you're using AI for virtual product placement. How is that different to generative techniques, and why just not use a basic LLM?
Yeah, really good question. We get that a lot. So first off, just to be clear about what we do, a creator would create a video. It's 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning. They've been working on it for days. They're sitting inside an editing tool. And then they come to us, and they're like, oh, I want to make money off of this. And then they pull, using our AI studio, a virtual can off the shelf, and they put it in there. And then we take care of everything. We animate it so it gets attention. We take care of the lighting. We take care of motion so your hand doesn't go through it. We make sure it sits on screen long enough to create value. All that's done by AI Studio, and it takes minutes. And then they publish it on YouTube or TikTok and now Meta, and they get paid. So that's what it does. So why can't you do this with LLM? LLMs are really good at creating from scratch. They create from nothing into an image. So it's completely unconstrained. What we do is the exact opposite. Typically, this is augmentation that you do through a pair of glasses. So you wear a pair of glasses and you augment the scene. We have to augment real-world video that might be an hour long, and it might have a moving camera situation. And we do not have access to the camera because we're not asking people to wear devices. We take any video anywhere. And so what that requires is AI that knows how to guess where was the camera that took this, what way was it pointing, and what's the trajectory of the camera. And you have to do the estimation on the error of the movement of the camera to 1 or 2 pixels of accuracy. And if you think about self-driving cars and robots, they can afford to have a few centimeters off. It's okay, the car's still gonna make it through. In our world, if your virtual object is more than a few pixels off, it looks like it's floating above the table or it's sinking into the table. So you gotta get the camera right. You have to map all the lights out for every single frame on every single pixel. You have to get the occlusion, the movement of people into the scenes and people holding objects. Then you have to synthesize the object in. So generative techniques simply don't do that. There is a new class of foundation model that's going to emerge, of which we're one of them, which is kind of 3D aware, spatially aware real world models. And we're in that class. It just so happens that we're using this foundation model for a media purpose.
All right, and if we were to take one step back and ask about you as a person, You seem to be a very values-based individual. How do you integrate that into your businesses that you start?
Well, if you look at one of the really interesting things about building a company is how you build the company. It's not just the mission. A lot of people are trying to take the mission and make it sound so socially impactful to look better. I'm not critiquing that. Sometimes the mission actually is a very healthy mission. But every company can also build its company in a values-driven way, regardless of what they do. And you see that in companies that are healthy. So a lot of focus on having values that make a far better company a better place to work and a better output product by focusing on the day-to-day values that drives the company. I'll give you one. We only have 4 values that really focus on. One of them is we look for multipliers. When I first graduated from MIT, I had this incorrect view of the world that you needed to surround yourself by geniuses, people of very, very high skill in whatever they do. Turns out that's not really a good equation. And I learned that over the years, which is I want people who multiply the people around them and are high skill. So if you can sell, you sell really well, but you can cooperate with the team. If you're an engineer, you make everyone around you work. And I stopped looking for people who are really, really high skill assholes. That combination doesn't work. That's just one of our values. And we look for that when we're interviewing. And you interview in ways like not just the classic interview, because we have a rigorous interview, but you want to take them outside of the interview process to get to know who they are. So that's just one of our values that I think is as important as what we do is how we do it.
That's a very good answer. Back to you, Ghazi. How does Ghazi, a Palestinian who is passionate about music in a time where no one was minding the gap, maneuver his way to the top? And what advice would you share with other underrepresented founders?
By the way, I love the fact that you can say my name right. It automatically instills like a feeling of family. So it's really comforting and nice. You know, usually when I'm walking down the street, it's like, hey, Ghazi, you know? And then as soon as somebody says it the right way, I'm like, oh, it must be my cousin, you know? It's okay, we're all cousins. You know, can you rephrase the question again? Because I got so distracted by my name being pronounced properly.
All right. How does Ghazi,
Yeah.
a Palestinian who is passionate about music, in a time where no one was minding the gap, maneuver his way to the top? And what advice would you give to other founders?
You know, that's a very multi-layered question. Like, there's a lot of depth to that. I think definitely part of it is being a child of immigrants definitely instills a certain type of motor that maybe being born in a different construct, I wouldn't have that drive or that intensity. I think it's a combination of your nature and your nurture. So my nature, I'm already a high drive person by nature. My wife wakes up in the middle of the night and looks at me and she's like, what are you doing? And I'm looking at my phone. I'm like, I'm figuring out how this rotary engine works on this old Mazda RX-7. She was like, why? And I was like, I don't know. It's not a combustion engine. Like, who thought to build this, right? And she's like, you're crazy. And mind you, my wife is very intelligent. She's an attorney. And she says, you have a thirst and a curiosity that I envy. So I think that's my nature part. So my nature has always been to try to figure out how to make myself valuable. And then my nurture, my father was a very principled person. And so I also had that from a parental standpoint where it was like, you know, never let anybody tell you what you can do. Always value your autonomy. You live in a place where, for the most part, there's a level of autonomy that we didn't enjoy in other places. And then you have like this very complicated construct of living in a country like America where you have amazing opportunity, but you're also marginalized for simply existing, right? And you always feel, I think the word that I used to use to people is I used to say, because I didn't feel like I fit any major ethnic group, I felt invisible. So I wanted to build a company where nobody felt invisible. And I think it was that feeling at first that could be perceived as an Achilles heel, but it was a driver for me. And then as I got older, my Achilles heel became a unifier and became a superpower for me. Ghazi was a name that I was often ridiculed for. People called me Gaza Strip, ironically, called me Gonzo. Fozzie Bear, like all kinds of ridiculous names, right? But now, as that I'm older, I only go by my first name in the record business, and everybody knows exactly who you're talking about. So that became a superpower for me. People ask me all the time, being Palestinian, isn't that problematic for you in business? And I say, sure, it might be problematic. If I have 10 relationships and I lose 7, but I galvanize 3, I don't care about the 7 I lost. I care about the 3 that I galvanized that would run through a wall for me. It's not the quantity of the relationships, it's the quality of the relationship. So I look at things through a qualitative lens. I'm saying all this to say is this laid the foundation for me as an individual to even be able to get to the point to even want to start a company. Because if I didn't have these inner emotions and these feelings, I probably would have been just fine working for another organization and working my way up the ladder. My last job in Silicon Valley was at Sun Microsystems. I was 24 years old, and I was the CEO's tech for 2 years. And one day I realized he had no idea who I was, and he didn't know my name. And I never went back to work ever again in a construct where I worked for somebody. I went out on my own, and I said, I'll never be in a situation where somebody doesn't recognize my talent or recognize my humanity. And I promise that if I get to sit in the driver's seat, I'll build a vehicle that drives straight, and I'll build a vehicle that's inclusive of a lot of people who share the same sentiments I share. And so no better place to do it for me than in the record business, where we are definitely people that are on the outside looking in anything that has to do with media. And in the beginning of this, you said people who control the media can control the minds. I think that's what you guys said, right?
100%.
And so I believe in that to a degree. And I think I have a mantra, and it's not a violent one. It's just a mantra. I say real killers move in silence. And so I wanted to be a killer in the music business. And so I kept my head down in San Francisco in the B market where nobody knew where I was at. And this annoying little mosquito one day evolved into a bald eagle. And now I can put other people on my wings.
Nice. And back to you, Omar. Last question. To all those that do not know, Omar is a serial founder. What is it about Omar? What keeps you? What's the drive that keeps you founding companies? And what are the most important things to do when you start a company?
Yeah, so first of all, I think I'm just an adrenaline junkie. If I just have to be honest, I just can't help it. Like, I finish and my wife's like, okay, let's take 6 months off. And within months, I'm already doing something. It's how I have fun. And so when I wake up on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, if I can steal a few hours, before anybody's ready to do anything to do what I do, that's how I have fun. So I can't help it is the first question. In terms of what I focus on when I'm building, the first problem is a really, really big problem. Because exactly what you envision isn't what's going to happen. Something's going to change along the way, and if the problem space is big enough, you can accommodate your way through it. Whereas if you choose something small and you're off, that's a problem. So choose really, really big problems is number one. The second thing I focus on is I spend a huge amount of my time in product market fit space, in customer problem space. So, Einstein has this famous quote, if he has 60 minutes to solve a problem, he'll spend 55 minutes of it characterizing the problem. It's the same thing in startup space. Don't waste a damn minute on competitors. All your time has to be into customer problem space and how solutions you're building might solve it, but not the opposite. And so I look at this product market fit as the difference between sculpting and surfing. So product market fit, if you think of it as a sculpture, Michelangelo basically looked at this huge rock and he just removed, everything that wasn't David, right? That was a famous quote of how he built that sculpture. That's one way to think of it, where you in your mind's eye know exactly what to build 10 years out. I kind of look at problems more like surfing. You see a wave, I do not create waves. The environment creates waves. I find waves. I figure out how to ride them. And I fall over and over and over as I improve and I get it right. That's the model that kind of fits into my way of thinking. It's continually out there getting my energy from my customers, understanding how they're reacting to my product, how they're rejecting my product, how they have this other need I just didn't envision to improve what I do. And that's how I think you get to a better and better place.
Great answer. And if we were to look at Rembrandt specifically, how big can this get? Be it economically, be it in terms of impact?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it never bet against consumers. They really, truly hate ads, but they want free content. And so if we could impact literally every video, every creator, when they come to finish their video, would come into a platform like ours and bring in a virtual object so that they get paid. Every movie, instead of now negotiating 2 years to get into the script in advance, you can have the movie done. It could be sitting in, Disney or Netflix catalog. It could be 2 years old movie, and right before it airs, we can inject things into the movie. Every live stream, we could embed it into TikTok, into YouTube, into Meta. We can literally put it everywhere. And when we get to that point where in real time, the objects are being inserted in and out of these based on, Perrier in France and, Pepsi in LA and Liquid Death in New York, if we could get to that level on every video ever created, yeah, that's pretty big.
As Transform VC, we love what you're doing, and I think everyone here loves what you're doing. What is it that this audience of investors, founders, and business people can do for Rembrandt?
Well, if anybody's got a following on YouTube or TikTok or Meta that's, 100,000, maybe 50,000 and up, just let us know. We'll put you in an AI studio, and you can start monetizing some of your videos.
Great, thank you. And back to you, Ghazi. What values do you look for in an artist beyond musical talent?
That's a tough one because it's a balance between keeping the lights on and working with individuals that you feel passionate about. It's very rare that you find somebody to work with where you feel like they embody the spirit of the same principles, the same business ethics, so on and so forth. Because oftentimes you're meeting artists when they're 18, 19 years old, right? So you're kind of serving as a mentor and a glorified babysitter as well as a business partner. Because what happens when you give an 18-year-old kid $1 million? They feel invincible, right? And so a lot of times the first couple years is what I call being a crash test dummy, like keeping people from crashing. I'm giving you this money. You're a very talented human being, but let me figure out how to nurture you and get you into your 20s, and then from your 20s to your 30s where we can have a legacy play together. But for me personally, what's important, if it was up to me at all times, which is not up to me at all times, because again, I have to play the balancing act of growing the company and on top of that, building a legacy, right? Because we're an owner-operated company, which is very rare nowadays. I want to work with artists that 10 to 15 years from now, I can say I was proud to stand next to this person because they embody a lot of the same principles that I embody. I can't say that about every artist that I work with because, again, some of them pay the bills and keep the lights on, and then there's that certain special group of people where you're like, something in my heart ticks a little different when I'm around this person.
And to follow up on that, how do you balance promoting authenticity versus the pressure to generate mainstream big hits?
I mean, we've produced some of the biggest hits in the world. I mean, we're sitting on one right now. The Shabuzi record almost broke every record in the history of the music business. The beautiful thing about that record is I really like Shabuzi. He's an amazing human. So it's like by God's grace, it checked every box, right? I feel like I'm talking to my little brother. Like his parents are Nigerian. He grew up in Virginia. He's making country music. So he's a square peg in a round hole, a black African kid from Africa making country music in what's considered a very insular market, right? And so a lot of people were upset and a lot of people reached out to me because he didn't win the Country Music Award for Best New Artist. And they said, he was robbed and this and that and the third. I said, bro, we made it into the building. Like, we made it into a place that people that look like us never make it, right? His manager, Jared, is black. His other business partner, Abbas, is Ethiopian. I'm Palestinian, and Shabuzi's Nigerian. And we're walking into an award show in Nashville. That's like virtually impossible 20 years ago, right? And I appreciate the applause, but I'm not saying it for the applause. I'm saying it, every person in this room is in the same space, right? When I used to work for Sun Microsystems, there was no people of color and barely any women in the board meetings. And fast forward like 20 years later now, like look at how well represented we are in media, in the arts, in tech. I saw a metric the other day that said it listed how many tech and Fortune 500 companies were operated by like Indian and Pakistani background. It was fascinating to read, like to see people of color and minorities moving into spaces that they've never moved before. So Empire is a record label, but to me, in my spirit, it's a philanthropy company at this point, masquerading as a record label. And so music just happens to be the fuel and the medium to continue to perpetuate change and mind the gap.
Thank you, thank you. And with that, another round of applause for Ghazi and Omar. Thank you for the panel. Thank you, everyone. And with that, I'll introduce Afra, our fellow, who will introduce you to the next panel and speakers. Thank you for having me.
Hello, everyone. My name is Afra Seleme Göncioğlu. I'm from Istanbul, Turkey. Currently, I'm pursuing my master's degree in climate, energy, and environment at Columbia University in New York. As a fellow at Transform VC, I'm deeply passionate about bridging gaps in equality within energy industry and driving impactful solutions at the intersection of climate and innovation. It's my honor to introduce our next panel, Energy and Climate Gaps, where we will be exploring the question of what are AI, the internet, and mobile experiences like without energy. Please join me welcoming our next panelists, Rad and Zohaib.
You already know me. So Zohaib, over to you.
Absolutely. Is this on? Thank you. Thank you, Rod. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. Great to see everyone. Thank you for the folks putting this together. Great event. My name is Zohaib Dar, former engineer, innovation lead at Ernst & Young, delivering across the built environment, energy, and climate sectors, servicing M&A, capital advisory, and tech enablement. And here at Transform VC, helping lead the charge at investing across AI and climate. So glad to be here and hope to have a great discussion.
Awesome. So would love to welcome Khaled Hassouna, the founder of Ample, and Chris Devlantis, founder of Reach. Please come on down. All right, so Khaled and Chris, we have brand new audience this year. We've got some return customers from last year, but generally brand new. So would love to learn from each of you very briefly what Ample does and what Reach does. So we'll start off with you, Khaled.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So Ample, in simple words, is a battery swapping company. So our goal is to deliver energy to any electric car in less than 5 minutes, 100% charge, without requiring a significant upgrade of the grid or significant modification to any vehicle. And we do that through a combination of smart battery design so that we can update cars without really making any modifications to it, and smart robotics so that we would be able to effectively swap almost any car. We can go from as little as a Fiat 500e and as large as a 8.5-ton Mitsubishi Fuso e-Canter. All of them swap exactly the same station in 5 minutes, 100% charge.
Wonderful. Chris.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Ryan. Well, it makes sense how we're partnered together. My name is Chris Devlantis at Reach, and Reach's focus is to build long-range wireless mesh networks, specifically for power. So you may think about mesh networks in terms of mesh data. We build community scale and sort of city block scale wireless power mesh networks that deliver energy remotely over hundreds of meters to low kilometers, to robotics, distributed sensors, et cetera. And so we are augmenting the grid, providing a flexible energy access layer that augments on top of the grid on the existing infrastructure, and allows you to use that in critical environments and places where maybe the infrastructure has failed you in the past. So we can work hand in hand.
Exactly. So I'll say one thing is that, at Transform VC, we invest in super cool things, like, the advertising tech with Rembrandt. You watch a demo, Rembrandt.com. But I always say that cool AI and this and that and the other, just imagine how that experience would look like if there was no electricity. Not so good. So we also love to invest in the not so sexy stuff, but really foundational to the world we live in. So thanks for being with us.
Chris, quick point, like I'd love to ask a little bit as to how you guys are leveraging AI to your advantage.
Sure. So that's a good question. First, let me give a little bit of groundwork for folks to better understand what it is that we build. We have essentially an oversized Wi-Fi router looking box, kind of looks like a Starlink panel, and then that can understand different devices in the network and beam energy to it. So think about like a laser beam, although it is not laser, it's all a millimeter wave, sending energy to those devices. So some of our big customers are actually within manufacturing, logistics, and in chemical plants, where they're adopting more and more edge AI devices. And they're using those edge AI devices as batteryless sensors or battery-powered sensors to go and ensure people are staying safe in different environments. So you imagine doing chemical monitoring, things like that. One of the issues that they have is that 30% of their batteries are dead at any time, even though they pay crews to go and replace them. So we see AI come up not only with how our customers use the systems, right? They're putting these distributed artificial intelligence at the edge to keep people safe, but also in the way that we run our own algorithms. So our system will intelligently look through, determine which sensors or robotics are of critical need, and then auto-prioritize those. It'll do that using a series of machine learning and AI algorithms to ensure that you maximize battery health, keep the whole network awake and alive. So it's kind of on both sides for us. It's on the underlying way of how we send energy and how we form sort of these beams safely and efficiently so that you can wirelessly broadcast power, but also on the actual end devices and enabling them to take more distributed intelligence, more autonomy through a lot of the recent advances that we've seen in AI and edge computing.
Awesome. Khalid, we know that the industry is sort of pushing towards energy as a service. Now, how do you see yourself and your team playing within that?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of ways. First, let's identify kind of what makes electrification so difficult, right? I mean, if you think about it, for 15 years now, we've had Tesla, we've had Nissan Leaf, and now almost every automaker is making an electric car. And the price is still pretty high. If you think like you can't buy really an EV for less than $40,000, there's a lot of ads about 25 to 40 is typical number, but that number is going down very quickly, and over time it will keep going down. One thing I think people didn't appreciate until recently is that the actual challenge, the actual gaps, since we're talking about mining the gap, the actual gap is really the infrastructure. That's where we're falling really, really short, right? And to a great degree, if you think about it, a lot of the adoption in electrification has been happening with people who have a way to plug in their car and charge it every night, or are driving a small number of miles every day. If you go outside of that use case, the gap is pretty large. If you park in the street and you're dropping off your kids at school in the morning and you're going to work, you're not going to want to go to a fast charger and wait for 45 minutes once a week. That's just not going to work, so you're not going to buy an electric car. If you are a DHL that needs to electrify 300 trucks, and that means you're going to spend $3 million on your warehouse that you're renting, hence you can't actually do CapEx work in it, you're not going to do that. So the challenge becomes, how do you take something that now requires so much capital or operational or lifestyle change investment and kind of collapse that? And the simplest way is to offer the whole thing as a service, right? So you just kind of collapse the whole thing and you say, listen, just buy the product and then you pay as you use, so you don't have to make an upfront payment that's very, very significant. So that's generally our approach. So if you think about it today, again, let's going back to the fleet, if you want to spend $3 million installing chargers, which is typically what the cost is anytime you go above 100 cars, our offering is that you can actually spend $0 up front. We'll go drop in it takes us 3 days to install a swapping station. It's like literally like a box you drop, and then now you can drive into it and get 100% charge in 5 minutes. So we're reducing the cost of creating infrastructure. We're reducing the complexity of connecting to the grid because we charge the batteries when energy is available and very slowly, as opposed to requiring a lot of power. And hence, we're kind of solving all the problems so we can offer it to you as a service. So we reduce the gap for adoption. So for you to be able to get in a car and drive it, it's just as complex as a gas car. I mean, today, when you buy a gas car, you don't think, how big is my tank? Are there enough charging gas stations? Is there enough infrastructure? How much am I going to pay to create a gas pump? You don't think about any of these things. So our goal is to say, buying an electric car and using an electric car, whether you're a consumer or a company that has a 1,000-car fleet, should be as simple as driving a gas car. So by offering energy as a service, you're collapsing all of that and really kind of making it as simple as you just buy a car and drive it.
Awesome. And have you seen sort of the market pushing towards that?
The answer is yes. I mean, I'll tell you this, which is we're often the companies that choose to work with Ample, whether they're automakers, whether they're fleets, whether they're governments, are not the ones that haven't figured out how to solve electrification. They're the ones who actually have been solving electrification and understand how complex and expensive it is. Right? So if you think about it, who's working with us is Toyota, Stellantis, Daimler Truck, Kia, and that's because they understand kind of what the challenge is. So we come in when people have tried to do it and they understand how complex and expensive it is. So we're seeing demand. I mean, I'll tell you this, which is we're deploying right now in Japan. In Japan, they are so, for an advanced economy, they're so behind in electrification that everybody's wondering why. And the question is because the Japanese are not going to just throw money at it and wait to see. Their approach to businesses and government policy is very different. They say, until we see something that's going to work, we are not going to do it. The moment we showed up, we have 3 automakers working with us. We have 4 of the largest fleets in Japan. We have the Japanese government and the Tokyo metropolitan government working with us. So there's a lot of pull to the degree where we just got approved for a $20 million grant from Tokyo saying, please just come install the infrastructure. So we are seeing the pull. But again, I want to emphasize that if someone hasn't thought deeply about the problem, understand what the issues are, they're not going to be able to understand how we immediately solve a lot of these challenges.
Awesome. No, agreed. A little bit of a shift and more maybe focally on impacting communities, disenfranchised and underserved. Chris, like you made a mention of flexible energy. How can you leverage that to serve underrepresented communities?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's a great question. So I think a lot of people might not actually recognize this, but there's a bunch of areas in the world where the grid does not extend. And the grid might not extend there because of natural features, or it might not extend there because of certain protected lands, or it might not extend there because in some cases, it's just too far away to make it economical for the power companies, or it's too small of a community to make it economical for the power companies. So right now, we at Reach are building out, again, I mentioned this distributed energy mesh network, and we focus a lot on scalability of this mesh network. So our initial applications are more of robotics, sensors, lower power systems, but we're working with a number of electrification companies and grid providers that are saying, hey, you know, I currently am mandated by US code or by some code, depending on where they are in the world, to ship diesel to this area because it doesn't make financial sense for me to actually run cables up there. So I'm literally shipping diesel back and forth. Could you set up a cheaper, more resilient energy beaming link that then allows us to use clean energy to reach these remote communities? And it's not even that high of capacity. The communities use energy probably along the levels of a few of the Apple chargers. They're not very high capacity communities, but they're underserved because they're in remote regions. So we've talked to a number of groups throughout Southeast Asia around this, throughout the United States, and even certain areas that are certainly not underserved, but are only operating on fossil fuels, like Catalina Island. People might not realize. All of Catalina Island is fossil fuel running. They ship in and out diesel. So we're looking at communities like that where you can say, hey, you currently have an energy supply chain that is not green, if you have one at all. And energy is the backbone of society, right? Energy is really what allows everything that we do as a world to exist right now in the modern age. So how can we then take a cleaner technology that's more resilient to climate change, more resilient to differing weather patterns, more resilient to different usages in the grid, and how can we provide advanced technology to deliver power cleanly to those areas? So we look a lot at the current situation of saying, all right, where is there a gap in terms of power access just because of the rural community? But even on top of that, because that's more of a longer term infrastructure play. And as you know so well, it takes a long time to change infrastructure. So in the interim, as the infrastructure is being built out, where can flexible energy help currently underserved areas? And a lot of that comes into natural disasters. So as climate change continues to get worse and worse, we're seeing a lot of different natural disasters in a lot of areas where the traditional grid is wiped out. So we at REACH have been able to work with, privileged to work with a number of first responders, where we can set up an energy beaming hotspot that then will deliver power to drones in the sky that can perform search and rescue missions, that delivers power to robotics on the ground, distributed sensors for earthquake monitoring, for different hurricane monitoring, and provide those distributed intelligence areas, distributed intelligence, I guess, tools to areas that have traditionally vulnerable infrastructure because of their geography. And so we're able to really leverage that to try to drive some of this democratization of energy and try to drive some of the power forward here.
I will say our partners in Turkey are really interested in speaking with you, Chris, because especially after the earthquake disasters. So remind me after.
Yeah, and we're interested in speaking with them. We'd love to.
All right. Do we have any questions from the audience? All right. We have one in the back left there, please. Wait for the microphone, please.
When you're pumping all this out, all this energy out, what happens to the humans in the proximity?
I'm assuming that one question's for me. So that's a great question. All of our systems are very, very, very directional. So we run by the same international codes that all of the cell phones do, all of your computers do, any consumer electronic does. So if you imagine I have an energy beaming station up where that speaker is, and I'm sending energy to a robot down here. All of us in this room are completely out of the field. We have lower energy hitting us than we do from a cell phone. And that's regulated under a series of international committees. Now, we have a series actually of intelligent sensors, triple redundant, in part powered by AI for one of the redundancies. We won't leave all of the redundancies in AI's hands, where if I then encroach upon that beam, before I interact with the beam, I can detect my presence. I can detect the energy that is about to interact with the human or wildlife or any other option. And I can reduce the power down within a millisecond to what's needed for human exposure. So we have triple redundant safety systems to ensure that in the event of interaction, all of the systems operate just like you would any other interlock system. And so that's third-party regulated to ensure that the goal is to do good in the world and not to fry people. And so we take that very close to heart as with any sort of new technology.
Thank you.
I think we had one more question in the back there.
Yeah. Hi. My question is for Khalid. You mentioned that electric cars, you're seeing them at the $40,000 range, and some people are touting a $25,000 car coming out. Or can you imagine a car being shipped with no battery, and just being because car manufacturers are dying for a monthly recurring revenue model, and just adopting Ample out the gates, no battery, and just here's your subscription for your service?
That's an excellent question. Thanks for asking it, because that's exactly what we're doing.
Okay.
So, so today our model, first, you don't want to ship a car out without a battery because then it becomes more expensive to move it around, but you want to sell it without a battery. So our model is not an aftermarket. We're actually working, for example, installing batteries in Fiat 500Es in Turin, Italy. We're installing batteries in e-canters in Kawasaki, Japan, at the factory. So we literally ship them a battery, just like any other supplier ships them the battery. The difference is that we're not actually selling the battery to the automaker and then they add it to the price and then they sell the car with the battery. Instead, they're just borrowing the battery from us. They're delivering the car and selling it without the battery. So when you buy a car, today it's more expensive than a gas car. When you buy an Ample-powered car, it's less expensive than a gas car because you're buying it without the battery. And then what we do is then we charge you a monthly subscription fee for the battery for the lifetime of the usage. Now, that has two significant advantages. One of them is, as you said, the cost is a lot lower. The automaker selling a car, I mean, the example is a Fiat 500D is a 35,000 euros in Spain right now. Right now, we have fleets buying the car for 18,000 euros. It's a lot cheaper, right? And then paying a monthly subscription, so that lowers the upfront cost. But the second big advantage, because of our modular approach, you can actually put in your car as much battery as your use case needs. So if you're driving 30 kilometers, 30 miles a day, why do you need a 300-mile battery? You can actually put a smaller battery. Every week, you just stop for 5 minutes somewhere and swap it, and you pay half the price. But if your use case one day requires more, you can put more. So there's a lot of advantages doing that, but your point is valid, which is lowering the upfront cost is what's going to make it a lot easier and cheaper for a lot of people to acquire cars and simplify the model, but also gives us interesting things to do with the automaker. That's already part of the model.
And I'll say now that Khalid and I have met, we'll work potentially in the next 15, 20 years. We'll just remove the batteries altogether, power distributed from the grid, all wireless, we'll be good.
Let's work on it.
Awesome. We have a question in the second.
Yeah, I have a question for Khalid. All the disruption in EV battery technologies that's happening right now, how do you mitigate that going forward in terms of form factors and different chemistry?
Excellent. Again, great questions. Okay, good audience.
We planted this audience.
Did you give them a list of questions? So 10 years ago when we started Ample, the first thing we did was not working on robots. We actually worked on power electronics. So the secret sauce of Ample is a layer of power electronics in our module that allows us to abstract the car from the chemistry. What does that mean? What that means is when you take the battery and plug it into a car, it talks to our plate inside the car and says, what voltage level should I operate on? What that means is that a car designed to work when we run chemistry and another designed to work with a different chemistry, the same battery can work across both. We're already doing that. Toyota and Mitsubishi work on totally different voltage levels, same battery works in both. But the beauty of it is that if tomorrow there is a different battery with a different chemistry, we put it in the same battery and it still works with all existing cars. So the reason OEM love that is that today when an OEM needs to make a decision, when Ned Curek...
What's an OEM?
Automaker, like an automaker, sorry, yes. When an automaker, like Ned Curek, the CTO of Stellantis, his nightmare is that he needs today to make a decision for the next 10 years about what chemistry to use. And he's tied in a contract where if another cell maker makes a better cell, he can't move to it. It will take him 5 years to make that transition. We eliminate that problem because if in 2 years, which we're already doing, there is a better chemistry, we put in all the cars on the road and everybody gets 10% more range. So we're kind of actually solving the problem rather than making it harder. Yeah.
Great. Front row.
Good. Thank you so much, Khalid. Ahmed Ashkar, fellow Palestinian. We're very proud of you. Congratulations on the success of Ample. Question for you is, are you vested in the Middle East at all, given your background? And where does the Middle East players lie in this? You're in Asia. Do you have any desire to try to take your product in the Middle East? Is there demand there? Or are we going to continue to see the Middle East kind of be followers in this space?
That's something Ryan and I talk a lot about, so as you can imagine. Listen, I mean, we definitely focus on the Middle East. That's one area we want to invest in. To a great degree, I mean, there's two big challenges. One of them is that the Middle East has a particular challenge from an infrastructure perspective, because each country in the Middle East have a very wide, complex, different challenge for creating infrastructure. If you're in Cairo, or in Egypt, your challenge is completely different than if you are in Saudi Arabia, right? Like, so in one place you have vast areas and tons of driving, and another you have Cairo that's very, very concentrated with barely no real estate in where you need it, right? So that's where we come in. We can solve that problem. I think the challenge is how do you get started and where, and you need local partnership. So a lot of the development is focusing both on how do we make the technology work for the Middle East in a way we can deploy? So I'm personally want to deploy. We're just trying to figure out. One other quick thing I want to mention is we have particular challenge of heat, which makes fast charging particularly challenging in the Middle East, and we immediately solve that problem. We can plug our station directly into a solar panel, which charge a battery slowly as the sun is shining, and we put in the car at 6 p.m. at night. So we have ways in which we can solve, but the challenge is finding the right local partners. Yeah. But
And you've also heard Bruce Lee saying, "Be like water, my friend. Go with the flow." So, unbeknownst to you, but I think subconsciously Khalid is a kung fu player because he is going with the flow. Japan is all over Ample, so why turn them away? Europe is all over Ample, why turn them away? And hopefully the Middle East will follow.
I've never been described as Bruce Lee. Thank you.
All right,
I have one. As an audience member, with the change in administration coming and something of topic, with all the progress that we've made towards an energy transition, how do we keep the momentum going?
Sure. I'll start. So I'm going to sidestep Trump altogether. Yeah? So I think very often we think of the world as if change is going to be directly impacted by politics. And I think that's a reversal of the role of politics. I think politics, in the long term, will respond to what is it we need. That's if you're optimistic about the world, right? So in general, it's very obvious that unless we solve this problem in the next decade, maybe two, then we're going to be in deep trouble, and the problem is just going to keep getting worse and worse. So I'm not really pessimistic. I mean, I think there is such drive. There's so many people. I mean, I'll tell you, I think we have recruited more people out of oil companies in Texas than any startup in the Bay Area, because everybody there understands what the problem is and wants to be part of the solution. So if you step back, I think a lot of people know what's going on, and that momentum is what's going to cause a solution. It's not going to be some president elected somewhere is going to make a difference. It's going to be enough people understanding that we need to do something about it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. Just to build off of that, I think energy is not a political problem, right? Energy is a problem regardless of which side of the aisle you're on. Us at REACH, we're fortunate to work very deeply with the U.S. government and Department of Energy as we work towards energy transitions. And depending on who you're talking to in D.C., it's either we need to push on energy because we need to push on clean technology, or we need to push on energy because we need to deal with autonomy and defense, right? Regardless, it's an energy issue. And so I think that one of the main things that entrepreneurs need to drive, such as us, is to ensure that the technology is driving a core fundamental gap that applies regardless of political affiliation, regardless of knowledge and internal desires, because ultimately that's what's going to allow us to lift up society at large, right? Through deploying flexible energy solutions, more clean energy solutions, adopting the electrification of everything. And those problems can be framed in a way that it affects everybody, regardless of your underlying belief system. And so I think that just as you mentioned, pulling in a bunch of the oil people, right, the more you can provide value and have folks know that, hey, this is in your best interest too, even if we don't agree on a lot of other things, the better that we can drive society towards this cleaner transition.
Agreed.
Wonderful. I'm getting a lot of messages from Zoom. Apparently the audience there really would love to see the audience here. So how do you guys feel about that? How do you all feel about that? Excited? Yeah? Okay, well, give us that big smile and wave at the audience on the Zoom. Wonderful. All right. So this was a fabulous panel. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Proud to be able to come.
Now, please help me welcome to the stage the next fellow who's going to help us kick off the next panel. Welcome to the stage, Omar.
Thank you, Haidar. My name is Omar Al-Ramlawi, and I joined Transform VC from Tampa, Florida. And I've been here for over a year. And just over a year ago, I was an undergraduate student wanting to grow and learn and really didn't know what I was going to do post-graduation. And now, just over a year later, I'm an analyst at Citibank. And it's been a joy trying to balance both positions as they've both really equipped me with skills and taught me how to grow in their own unique ways. Now, during my time with Transform VC, I've been in the deals team where I've had the opportunity to evaluate different companies and really get to know a lot of the innovative founders that have applied to us. And working alongside different people here at Transform who have the mentality of keeping impact as the #1 priority is truly inspiring. Now, I'm very excited to introduce our next speakers who are going to be talking about identifying gaps for your generation. Please help me welcome to the stage Greg Billington, who is actually a 2016 Olympian, try not to be insecure, Wharton MBA and finance entrepreneur, who's going to be joined by Aman Ibrahim, who is actually an expert in machine learning and co-founder of Deep Trust, and Abdul Wahab Umaira, who is actually Syria's youngest inventor, and you can Google that. He's also the founder of Pharmatex. Please welcome him to the stage.
Thanks a lot, Omar. Welcome up to the stage. I feel very lucky to be able to be here immediately after the break, where people are energized, happy to be in here. We've had a couple phenomenal panels. We had some delicious food, which brings up, how much do you care about that you can trust how your food was made? Or that you can trust, especially for those on Zoom, the things that you can see and hear? And for those of you, those are two. If you care about those two things, that is phenomenal, because we have two founders here with two companies that are helping to solve both of those problems. One company is building AI-driven software to help build precision farming, and the other is ensuring human authenticity in the era of AI by solving for deepfakes. And while they can detect deepfakes on video conferencing tools, I have been assured I can still wear sweatpants on my video conferencing calls, and I'll keep my eye on him that we can still keep on doing that. But I'm Greg Billington. I'm thrilled to be talking about the generation gap today. I'll go through some questions before opening it up to the audience. I joined Transform VC because I was at Visa and I loved my work at Visa, building payment solutions for people around the world. But I wanted to feel personally more connected to the impact that I was having. So I was thrilled that I could join Transform VC and work with companies like Pharmatex and Deep Trust in order to help impact the world. The reason that we're talking about the generational gap today is because we're seeing generational changes have a peak on the impact that they're having in society. Right now, we're seeing a massive wealth and property transfer between generations. We're seeing that AI is having a huge upheaval and impact on how media can be created and consumed. And the challenges that we're facing now are ever-changing and growing, especially in climate. And these are tied to what these folks are doing, because with climate, we're seeing that there is a 25 to 50% decrease in the nutritional content of things like tomatoes and potatoes. And I didn't learn that a tomato was a fruit for it to not be healthy anymore, and so I'm kind of mad about that. And with Deep Trust, obviously, what they're working on is making sure that we can trust what we see and what we hear. And so without further ado, I'm excited to start asking questions of our founders. So first off, it would be great to get to know both of you a little bit, get to know a little bit about your background. Abdul, you have a fascinating background in robotics and AI, from Syria into Turkey, now graduating from Stanford to work on Pharmatex. Can you talk a little bit about your background and how it led you to be interested in working in farming?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And my background is deeply personal. And I think it's what they call an unorthodox way of getting to Stanford. Like, that's what the journey have been. For me, it started in Syria. As you heard, I was named the youngest Syrian inventor in 2011. And then had to, in 30 minutes, our lives changed, all of us who grew up there. Came from an established family. In 30 minutes, I found myself in a refugee camp on the border of Turkey. So the journey really started in a place where I didn't have a choice to make. I found myself in an environment where there's nothing but you're in survivor mode. So that led us to jump into this survivor mode, what they call in the Valley like founder mode. You have a lot of problems around you you're trying to solve. One of the main ones that you mentioned, in 2015, when Russia stepped into the war in Syria, we have seen this elsewhere. In Gaza, we've seen it in Ukraine, where they start using some bomb that are classified as vacuum bomb, where a whole building collapsed on the people and people get trapped underneath it. What's really heartbreaking about this, the people underneath the rubble, they don't die from the bomb itself. They die because they got stuck for 18 hours. They have no one was able to get to them in time. That prompted the thing that, hey, we have an actual real big problem. What do we do for it? That's where I found the intersection, that technology, AI, or robotics is a tool that we could use to solve those problems. 2015 to 2016, worked with a local organization like the White Helmets. We deployed a robot into northern Syria in Aleppo, free Aleppo now. Where we were able to scan through the rubble and using a multi-array radar, measuring different densities of organic matters, of different reinforcement bars, cement, and then being able to 3D map the rubble and finding the people under the rubble. What that led us to do is, first, knowing where the people are, and second, we're able to find them in time. Then we start introducing, that was my first AI model that I wrote. It was a vision model that relied on thermal signature to identify who's alive and who's dead, which meant that you're saving more people. This project worked for 3 months. It saved 93 lives. And then from there, that was technically the journey that started. And then I found myself again as a refugee in the US. Everything had to start from scratch. I didn't speak English, just came here in 2016. I had to learn English. I discovered that my high school diploma that I studied in the refugee camp, it's not acceptable, not credited. So I had to go through the whole jazz of GAD, getting the SAT, ACT, failing each exam 4 times until I got the full one. So I took 4 gap years. Where I had an opportunity to work in different companies. And then that was the journey from camp to campus. What I'm trying to say here, that when I got to Stanford, when I got to campus, which in the Bay Area, a lot of you guys are living in an environment where you have a lot of opportunities around you. You're lucky to have it. A lot of people doesn't realize how much opportunity you have here to, just around you, just being in an event like this. So that was the time where I discovered, even during college, funny story, me and my co-founder and my founding engineer, we all started as a pre-med, and then we switched back to CS. All of us, again, going back to the first panel where Omar mentioned something that I agree with, and also I'm gonna give another opinion. We were mission-driven. For us, we see technology as a tool. We also, at the same time, our mission is to impact the food that every American eats on their table. We'll go back to the nutrition gap that we're trying to address here, but that's where the vision was born. My co-founder Ahmed was working on a cancer research where he tried to identify the latest, reasons of cancer, how to address that, and then he just realized, we're reaching a point where we're trying to solve the problem after it happens. Why don't we go back to the root of the problem? For me, it was different. For me, it was, throughout my life, anything, what drives me every morning is to wake up, do something that would impact, maximize impact, talking about impacting a billion. So that was the kind of where we intersected, and that's where Pharmatex was born.
That's phenomenal. It's incredible to hear about. It's incredible to hear about how the grit in different areas of life can carry you through and really bring in a confluence of ideas into solving new problems. Thanks so much. It's a hard act to follow, Aman, and I apologize. But it's fantastic to hear also you've had a background where you founded different companies, you've worked in machine learning in different areas, you came over from Cruise in order to solve a problem. Can you talk about how you made that transition and why Deep Trust resonated so clearly with you?
Yeah. First, Thank you for having me here. I appreciate the Transform team also giving me this opportunity. Honored for that. My reasoning behind building Deep Trust is also quite personal, myself as well too. It starts even before me, I would like to say that. Where does this drive to come even solve this type of problem? Both of my parents were, actually I was just realizing this while I was sitting there, they're double immigrants. My family, ethnically, we're Eritrean. So, a country in East Africa, if any of you guys know who Nipsey Hussle is, he's probably my second cousin or something. And they also immigrated to, my father immigrated like from Sudan, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia. At one point he told me he lived in Italy at some point. I don't know his detail, but a majority of my family, they first immigrated to Saudi Arabia, and after some time they came to America. And my father was fortunate enough to come to the States to study computer science. My mother came here with her family. And I was always, the theme I'd like to say of myself so far is always, how do you solve problems, difficult technical problems, with the ability or possibility of it being a great help to people? And for me, that's, if I were to summarize like the last 8 years of my life, or even from my childhood even, when I was young, we were very community driven. My dad would start an initiative where we'd build computers for the refugees in our community. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina. We had a lot of refugees living there from different countries, from Syria, Eritrea, other countries as well. And we'd build computers for free because how can you operate, if you want to get a job or the food stamp check, you have to have some sort of technology. So I was exposed to that 5 years old, 6 years old, building computers for that sort of cause. And that continued onwards and onwards, from my youth to high school, college, always building something where I felt like there was a technical challenge, but then at the same time, it could do some goodness for it at the same time. There's this general concept that's called Sadaqa Jariyah. It's like a charity where it's more, the value is more than just the money that you give in. There's a value that continues and persists beyond your time. Because your time here is, how long were we here for, not even in this room, but on this planet.
It feels like a long time.
Yeah. And for me, I'm just driven by the fact that you could build something that can have a legacy beyond you. So even when I was in building applied ML and healthcare use cases and research, when I was at Cruise, I chose to join Cruise because, listen, it's a difficult problem to solve, self-driving cars. And if you achieve it, you're not talking about just, making transportation more accessible, removing the concept of traffic. But in a lot of countries, this is the number 1, number 2, number 3 cause of death. And for me, that was a driving motivation. So then that naturally led to Deep Trust, where you're now talking about a world and environment where your own eyes and ears betray you. So that's basically my little story that got myself to.
No, that's perfect. It leads perfectly into the next question, which is now we're seeing deep fake attacks occur. I think once every 5 minutes you were talking about.
Yeah.
Why do you think the audience should care about what you do and what you work on?
Yeah. If you guys don't mind, I'm gonna ask you all a question. Raise your hand here if you've gotten a scam call. Yeah. How many of you guys picked that call up? You can keep your hands up. It's okay. Yeah, not me. Come on, guys. Who of you guys let it go to a phone, like your voicemail? Yeah, you guys are the smart ones, right? No, you guys are all in danger. So the situation we're talking about right now is it only takes 3 seconds to clone a voice. We like to say to steal a voice. And because of that ease and accessibility, you're talking about the ability to scale these sort of attacks like no other kind. And this is not only a problem for individuals. The first thing that goes to your mind is probably my mom, my grandma. But this is an issue that is relevant to anyone with eyes and ears, because we have the saying, seeing is believing. Why would I doubt something I see and hear? And now we're in an age where our own biology again is fighting against us. So the problems that this causes or accelerates are things that we've already been dealing with, but now are only going to get accelerated. So whether it's misinformation, it's intellectual property theft, social engineering, scamming people, it's taking a tool that was meant for the benefit of humanity and misusing it against people. So that's why this is a problem that should be relevant to everyone here. So yeah.
I came here to be happy, not scared.
Yeah, sorry
What
about
are you
that.
doing, man?
Wait until you hear what I'm gonna say.
Oh, similar question to you, Abdul. What farming is changing rapidly? I think there's different elements that are decreasing the nutritional value of food, as well as other challenges in the farming industry. Why should folks care about what Pharmatix does?
Yeah, for us, we over the past 70 years, actually, the practices that have been done in especially monocrop farming in the U.S. have depleted the nutrition value in your food that you're eating every day by 50%. And you can read the article. You can read the study that was published by the USDA. Also, I have somewhat of a bad news for you guys. How many of you went to the grocery store and looked at the two items, one the organic one and then the other one? They picked the other one. You went back to the organic because you felt guilty, and then you picked the organic. Show of hands. Nice job. How many of you felt better after doing this? Well, bad news for you. This label that you're paying for, premium for, it doesn't mean much, honestly. And reason why? Because systematically, the way we have been farming in the US, some parts of Europe, have been mainly focused on increasing yields short term, and then decreasing the cost. And when I say short term, reason why? Because we're throwing a lot of fertilizer, pesticides, herbicides on the soil that we're operating with, to the point where we're killing the organic matter that lives in the soil. There are really important fungi that lives in the soil, that lives on the root. The only way those would work is if you don't mess with them. To the point where now most of our farms have become a growing median. What that means, you cannot grow food without applying fertilizer. What this does, you lost all those organic matters that lives on the root of what you're eating, which means it's not getting the same nutritional value that you used to get before. So that's where we come into play.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Well, now that we have the audience who cares about us, the other person that should probably care about what you do is the farmer and the consumer. And I know that you've visited a ton of farms. You've visited about 100 farms. And these farms are getting impacted by the generational shift because 90% are around family owned. But really only, I think, around 27% are using precision AI today. How do you connect with those farmers, get them to trust and believe in what you're doing?
Yeah, farmers are one of the most interesting segment to work with. Because for farmers, it's a trust issue. We tried many ways in this, and this is for other fellow founders here. We purchased leads, we went into, we start calling people, emailing people, no success. I personally went into some of the leads that we purchased, almost got shot twice. The guy was like, what are you doing on my property? So I don't advise doing that. What really worked for our farmers is connecting, deeply connecting, bridging this gap of trust. Why? Because for them, for 5 generations, they have been farming, but what they have seen that corporate America, they have, the only thing they care about is to sell them more product. So for them, it's like, I don't trust you. You're just another sales rep that want to get my business, but at the same time, my margins are just getting slimmer. 2 months ago, the USDA published the report, the annual report of 2024. The last 2 years, an average farm income have decreased by 25%. I'm gonna say that one more time, 25% average income for a farmer. And that we're talking across the board, small farm, medium farm, but specifically family-owned farms. Reason why? Because the cost of operation have increased, the immigration crisis that's about to happen, and that's been happening. And lastly, the barrier to entry for those, you addressed the 27% of them using precision farming. Reason why it's really hard for them to use it. The barrier to entry is really high. You can still buy different pieces of software, but for them to able to navigate through those softwares is where we're trying to bridge the gap. So our method of doing this is we're building the solution from our customers. We don't really care about what our competitors are doing. We actually went into those farmers and actually worked on their farm for a few days to understand their problem. That's how we're bridging this gap.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. And similar question. Consumers care. Consumers don't want to be seeing things that aren't real, but at the same time, the people you sell to might not trust that your solution actually works. How do you connect with your customers?
Yeah, I mean, we work with enterprise security, so there's definitely a need for trust as well, not at the risk of getting shot. I think we just haven't been trying hard enough, I guess.
Got to step it up.
Yeah. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that the way our product works is we analyze audio streams and we do call security. And for the enterprises we primarily serve, we're talking about financial services, insurance, large enterprises that have their workforce distributed. There's naturally going to be, a need and urge for trust because we're analyzing private information. So a lot of that comes down, the solution to that is just being transparent. Like, what are we doing with that information? How does it actually provide value for you? And then also following standards, whether it comes to compliance and things like that. But then when you talk about the broader community or, consumer, this is, again, for me, the way I see this is an every single person problem. Where our ambition is to build a trust layer of the entire internet. And the way we think that this problem needs to be solved, who's the most exposed? It's going to be the person who's the least aware. So through that, our initiatives also are driven by education, whether it comes in the form of, showcasing content through blogs or videos, or even creating tools where people can experience the problem. So we have this unique thing that a unique tool that we call Tariff.ai, where it's essentially a conversational bot. It's very friendly with you. It's like, hey, how's it going? What's your name? Tell me a little bit about yourself. And in the process while you're talking to it, it starts memorizing things about you. It mimics the way you talk, whether you're, I don't know, I'm from the South, so, the Californians who got the Valley accent, it'll mimic it. And then third, it will clone your voice. Within 15 seconds, you're talking to yourself. And that is something that's actually helped people understand the problem. It's one thing to talk about it and say, oh, this is possible. It's another thing to actually experience it. So building this tool has actually helped educate not only individuals, but then whole organizations understand why this problem is an immediate risk. This is not like a maybe risk to them in the future, but something that is an actual problem today.
I remember that, but I did not enjoy that process of Tariff.ai. It was.
But it wasn't your voice that was stolen.
No, it was somebody else's in the audience.
Yeah.
We subjected him.
We
to
do
that
not have
terror.
your voice still, I swear.
I think one connection that I didn't immediately draw between what you both work on is just how critical it is to national security. Right, for a country, it needs to have food independence and needs to be able to trust in its institutions. And when we look at farming, for example, there was a survey done where over 60% of farms believed that generative AI was going to lead in cybersecurity threats, but only 38%, I think the lowest of all those surveyed, believed that actually they were ready and equipped to do something like that. It's what we make happen here. It's beautiful, these connections. Abdul, can you speak to how food security connects to these broader national security concerns?
Of course. Ready for scary stat? We have seen it play out, and I think the two most important sectors in any country's stability is energy and food. Because without, I can argue without any other sector, the country could survive for some time. But without those two, bad things gonna happen. One of the things that really hit for me was that 30% of almost 26% of U.S. Members in the military, active members in the military, they can't afford food, nutritious food. Where the gap that we see there is for a lot of those farmers, and we talked about the deserts, the food deserts that sprout around the U.S. We're talking 28%. Correct me if I'm wrong. Of the population in the U.S. that don't have access, they live in those food deserts. So for us, again, when we lower the barrier of entry, what we're really doing here, we're improving the margin for the farmer who's farming, and we're also, by doing that, we're not only improving our broader mission of improving the nutrition value, but we're also reducing the cost of the food. which means you're going to make it more accessible for the people around it. So that's where the national security come into play.
Perfect. Thank you, Abdul. And similar question: how can you help Abdul over there?
Yeah, well, I really don't want to keep talking about scary things, but there is a reality of cybersecurity related to national security threats, because cyber war is a reality, and what they love to target is critical infrastructure. That includes, places like farms, your electricity grids, and things like that. But threatening our collective, security and trust in institutions. There's also organizations that are built around trust that are the highest risk in general, like financial services. I mean, what more trust you need in any sort of organization than giving your entire wealth to, right? And they are the most targeted in terms of cybersecurity attacks and these sort of things. And these are one of the organizations that we help and solve this problem for. And then you even have media institutions we mentioned earlier in the panel before. Whoever controls the media controls the mind, right? And the reality is it becomes so easy to misinform people when you can create fiction in a matter of seconds. The barrier used to be, oh, are you an expert in Photoshop? Now can you type on a keyboard and you can make anything a reality? So I'm sorry that this conversation sounds very scary, but the way we actually really perceive the problem space and how large it really is the fact that we quote the liar's paradox. The liar's paradox is this concept in psychology where you have an individual called the liar. This is just a straw man that can do nothing but lie. And this person makes the statement that I am a liar, and thus it creates this paradox where that statement they're making is the truth, yet also they're the liar. We see the landscape of generative AI creates the exact same predicament, where if you see enough things that look and sound real but actually are truly false, the question is no longer, oh, what things are fake? The question then becomes, what is actually real? So that just is...
Just to close off, I think one of the things that we interact with on a daily basis when it comes to pharmatechs is the level of technology that we're seeing in the new tractors, new machinery from competitors like John Deere and others. They're trying, we're now sitting on the fourth wave or revolution in agriculture. The last one happened almost 100 years ago when they actually introduced the tractors. But now we're seeing all of those fancy sensors, all of those self-driving tractors. What's essentially happening, you're pulling millions of data parameter per minute, and you're sending that to a centralized database. What those companies are doing there, it's a locked system. You don't even have access to your own data. So that's where the threat of national security comes into play. Because now you're not only talking about the way we farm, the way we operate. A cyber attack could actually shut down those infrastructure. It could go into the mutation of the corn. That's the backbone of the American. We have 80 or plus mutation that's specific for the Midwest, where specific grains grows for fuel, for livestock feed. So there is a lot at stake when it comes to national security.
Perfect. And now that we've fully terrified the audience, the final question for both of you is there anything that the audience can do to help you in your mission? Or that can help either Pharmatechs or Deep Trust achieve kind of the mission-driven goals that you have? Aman, do you want to start?
Yeah, like I said before, step one is education. Educate yourselves. And coincidentally, we also have a newsletter that will help you do that. So go to our website, deeptrustai.com/blog. We have our own blog. My co-founder's blog is amazing as well, too. And then, if you have some extra time, you want to get your voice stolen, go to Terif, TERIF.ai, and have your voice stolen as well. It's fun.
For us, we're still in the kind of stealth stage. We just started in September, so don't try our stuff yet. But here's what I will say. If you know a farmer, or if you know someone who knows a farmer, please let us know. Would love to go speak with them, actually deploy our pilot with them, being partnered with them, and would always love to get feedback from people.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I think we ran too long, so there's no time for audience questions, but feel free to send it to us, and we would love to know what you're curious about. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alfez Hansen. I'm from St. Augustine, Florida. Currently a cybersecurity and technology researcher at the Atlantic Council and formerly a Division I student athlete. I research cybersecurity risks and capital markets, and I recently published an essay, a short essay, on cyber insurance premiums. But I joined Transform VC because I wanted the opportunity to engage with founders working in deep tech at the early stage to basically learn how technology was developed and how it integrates with impact on a societal level. Kind of the areas of technology that I was specifically focused on, cybersecurity, and the challenges that are associated with that, integrated nicely with what I was doing at Transform VC. And speaking of some of those challenges, I'm pleased to introduce our next presenter who will discuss cybersecurity gaps and how to address them. Zaid started writing code at 10 years old and from an early age knew that he wanted to build software products for a living. In 2012, he started a cybersecurity company, which he sold to Sun Micro in 2017. Prior to that, he was the head of product at working on Ubuntu. And so I'm very pleased to invite up to the stage Zaid Al-Hamami, founder and CEO of Boost Security.
All right, well, I do feel privileged to be here. Thank you, Rama, thank you, Raed, for inviting me to present. Right, so if you thought the previous session was scary, I've got news for you. I'm going to keep going down that path. As I mentioned, a little bit about myself. I'm born and raised in the Middle East, in Jordan. I moved to Canada to pursue my education in 1997, and I've been living there since. First half of my career, I was an engineer, learned from great people, worked at great companies. In the last 12 years, I started 2 companies. The first one, as was mentioned, was acquired, and now on the second one, both in the same field of software security or application security. Right. So, by the way, I should mention, Raed sent me 17 messages in the last 48 hours telling me keep it down to 10 minutes. I usually give this talk in 30, so I'm going to do my best. But have you ever asked yourself where cybersecurity breaches come from? How do they happen? We read about major companies, best in the business, right? They have breaches. And you ask yourself, don't they hire the best people? Don't they have big budgets? Aren't they buying the best products? The answer is usually yes to all of the above, right? But to understand why hacking happens and will continue to happen, there is this cycle of innovation that really will explain everything for you. We live in we're part of an open ecosystem. Anybody can innovate, and anybody can put the innovation on the table. And when an innovation is useful enough and desired enough, the adoption, the pull, is furious, fast and furious. There is nothing can stop it, right? Security, there's no security person saying, this technology is dangerous to use, do not use it. And as long as this continues to exist, what will happen is innovation will get wide adoption before security researchers, who are not as many as you think there are, have a chance to understand how that technology can be abused, okay? Over time, technology is already deployed, security research happens, eventually people figure out how to hack, right? Enough of that information makes its way into sort of bad actors who are trying to abuse it for fun and for profit and national interests. And you start hearing about these breaches. And as long as this cycle exists, where innovation and pull of it, like adoption of technology, is happening at a faster rate than security research can occur, we will have breaches, okay? Now, this is true since the personal computer days, all the way down until modern day LLM technologies. Now, this is an example that I like to give straight off Twitter. This was back when ChatGPT 3.5 was around. It was really, it caught wildfire. And you would ask ChatGPT, can you give me a list of sites where I can download pirated movies? And it would tell you, no, I can't give you that. I'm sorry. I'm programmed to not give you that. But if you just flip the question and ask it and say, I'm actually scared of accidentally downloading illegal movies. Can you give me a list of sites to avoid? It would give it to you, right? And so this is an exact example of how that innovation cycle happens. We just didn't have enough time to think of all the security angles where something as trivial as this can bypass the security controls that people have, Right. So understanding that cycle, you can ask yourself, or ask myself, what's the next big attack surface, or one of the potentially biggest attack surfaces? Something where an innovation has taken hold, has caught wildfire, is used everywhere. We have not had yet the time to understand the security research and the implications of it, and there is evidence of cyber breaches starting to occur. I would posit that one of the biggest ones, and it's going to be a problem for us as an industry for the next decade, is the actual act of software development. Okay? See, 25 years ago, for the vast majority of the world, most development happened inside companies. We didn't really use a lot of open source outside of the Bay Area, let's say. Waterfall software development methods. You control the software. You're released once or twice a year, maybe once every 3 years. That's how software happened in most of the world. Silicon Valley, in its ever pursuit of we need to ship fast, we need to get innovation out quickly, they developed a better way of building software. They used open source. Right? They leverage open source, they shared other people's code. They came up with better ways of releasing, building software and releasing. Well, 25 years later, the whole world builds software the same way, right? This is how software is being developed anywhere in the world at this point. So it's widely deployed, and yet security research is only starting to come out as to how this development methodology and the tools used to build software automatically can be abused. Right? So what can an attacker do that abuses your software development infrastructure? They can impersonate your developers, they can steal your source code, they can put backdoors into your products, they can move from your dev environment into production environment, and they can steal your data. All these things happen, and I will give a few examples of things that have already happened along these lines. Right? A few months ago, I was at a security conference called Black Hat, one of the famous ones in our industry. And a security researcher gave this talk, instead of Intel Inside, it was Inside Intel. That security researcher was able to, and this is, by the way, not his full-time job, he just does this for fun. Him and a colleague of his were able to get access to Intel Corporation's entire intellectual property. 120,000 software repositories, including all their microcode, all their chip designs, okay? All the proprietary software, and he did it in a few days. Because, again, we have an attack surface that is not well understood, right? The tools we use to build software and run software and test software, we're only starting to understand how these can be abused, only in the last few years, right? Example number 2, this actually made more news back in the day. This was an actual breach. SolarWinds is a very famous company in its space. Its customers include, the defense agencies here in the U.S., Fortune 500 companies in the world. Attackers, which is widely believed to be a nation-state actor, so a very sophisticated attacker, was able to get access to their software development infrastructure, their continuous integration servers, if you're more technical, and they were able to modify the automated build step so that at the end of every build step, a backdoor was inserted into the final product. Okay? The developers that worked in that company had no evidence and no clue. The customers had no evidence and no clue. For months, people even believe up to a year, wherever their product, that particular product was deployed, again, defense agencies here in the US, the nation-state actor was able to just connect through the back door into the customer network. Okay? Third example, this one is actually a near miss. Would have been actually the biggest attack in history, I believe. But in a nutshell, again, a sophisticated attacker, we don't know who, they were never caught, also believed to be a nation-state actor, spent 2 years pretending to be an open source developer at an important open source project, slowly inserting small snippets of code, when combined, created a very hard-to-detect backdoor. This particular library, called the XZ library, is part of every Linux OS in the world. Had it made its way there, again, it was caught early, like last minute, this would have been the biggest attack surface in history and would have affected pretty much every embedded device, cloud server, up to satellite in the world. Right. My company, Boost Security, we build technologies to help companies identify such vulnerabilities and help people secure these software supply chains. In our research, in the last couple of years, we have helped some of the world's biggest companies, biggest AI companies, biggest cloud companies, biggest database companies, biggest open source companies find and fix such flaws, right? Yeah, and it really doesn't take us much to detect these things. Again, the problem is very widespread. Here's just very simple snippets. This is everywhere. This is not one small thing that you can fix. It's, we've built an ecosystem based on trust. We trust open source software. We use a lot of automation in place. A lot of the building blocks of that automation is open source. And we never assumed that attackers are going to start getting good at, finding ways to insert themselves and their malicious intent into these things, right? So far, hopefully I've scared you well enough, but it really is a problem. We think it's going to be actually one of the biggest problems in the next decade. There are already lots of examples of major companies being breached there. How am I doing the time? We're done? 1 minute? Good. Right. So there is something you can do about it. Of course, education is part of the story. Of course, adversarial testing, or i.e., getting people to test against such vulnerabilities, consulting companies usually or internal teams, is part of the solution. But we are, in that earlier slide where I showed you at the end of the cycle, cybersecurity companies do emerge to plug these holes. Our company is one such company. And there are products today that help software teams, find and address such problems. So with that being said, by the way, any questions at all, please feel free to find me outside. I'd love to have a conversation. All right. Thank you. 10 minutes, Ryan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bashar. I'm from Syria. I joined Transform VC 2 years ago. I moved to the US 2 months ago. Nawara, who's sitting there, sponsored me to come to the US. I am now a refugee. A little bit about myself. I graduated with an AI degree. I have dedicated 2,500 hours volunteering at VIB.fund to support youth impacted by conflicts to pursue their higher education. Now I am embarking a master's degree in data science to develop data-driven solution. It is my pleasure to introduce you to the next panel.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Quinn, and I've been with Transform VC for just over a year. I see a few familiar faces in the audience from last year. Welcome back. Yahala. I'm thrilled to moderate this panel and explore a core theme driving Transform VC, identifying and addressing critical gaps in the VC ecosystem. As a Black female founder, I represent many of these gaps firsthand. The reality is VC still struggles with funding disparities, systemic bias, there we go, and overlooked opportunities to create true impact. For example, only 2.1% of VC funding went to all women-led startups in 2022, and Black founders received just 1% of total venture funding in 2023. These numbers highlight the systemic barriers that persist in our industry. But these gaps aren't just challenges, they're opportunities. Opportunities to innovate, to change, to build inclusivity, and to change the narrative about who belongs in venture capital and who gets funded. At Transform VC, we don't just identify gaps, we work to fill them. Since launching our fellowship program in February of 2023, nearly 80 fellows and interns from across the globe have joined us, bringing expertise in fields ranging from artificial intelligence, like Bashar, and medicine, and sustainability and product development. Today, 50% of our fellows are women, and they, yes. And they hail from diverse locations such as London, Dubai, Cairo, Raleigh-Durham, and San Francisco. Together, we're building a new future for venture capital, one that's inclusive, global, and deeply impactful. So, if I could have our next panelist join us, we're going to be focusing on our 3 focus areas of our fellowship program: her perspective, health tech, and climate tech, and how we're turning these gaps into opportunities to create meaningful change. So, Hannah, Greg, and Omar, if you could join me on stage, that would be great. All All right, we'll get started. So. Go ahead and start. Okay, great. All right, so first of all, Omar and Greg, if you wouldn't mind first introducing yourselves and share a little bit about your background experience and why you decided to join the fellowship.
Sure, I guess I'll go first.
Perfect.
So Nomi, my name is Omar Al-Khalaf. I'm a Syrian founder and humanitarian. I'll give you a quick insight into my background very quickly. So in 2017, I co-founded a charity initiative aimed at empowering students through the act of charity. To date, we've been able to raise over £1.1 million in pledges for charity. We have operations all over the world, from Southeast Asia to the Middle East and Africa. And then in 2018, I created a gaming organization in Tampa, Florida in the US, and it scaled to be one of the fastest growing esports organizations globally. And the reason why I actually joined Transform is because, to be honest with you, I have this thing about myself where I just tend to be very curious. I drive my parents crazy when it comes to my curiosity. And I wanted to learn a bit more about venture capital and how we can kind of I wanted to leverage my understanding of VC and contribute it towards impact. So that was the main reason to me joining Transform.
Thank you.
Thanks, Omar. Apologies for joining again so soon. I think as an Olympic triathlete, they assumed I had the endurance to do a couple panels.
Absolutely.
And so hopefully I haven't lost too much of that capability. You know a bit about my background already, but the reason I got really interested in Transform VC was during the Wharton MBA program, which is just a couple blocks away. I loved and I fell in love with finance and the potential that it could have to impact the world. And combined, I think as a former Olympian, I loved having something that I was really connected to, this mission that I was going for. And I saw Transform as a nice intersection of those two things. So absolutely thrilled to be here. Thanks, Gwen.
Amazing. Thank you. What about you, Hannah?
Thank you. Hey, everyone. So I guess for me, my background is in the banking sector and a management consultant by nature and trade. But I was really keen to do something more meaningful and with impact. And I started to dip my toe into the startup world and liked what I saw. But I saw a challenge, I guess, when I looked at venture philanthropy and other areas, because you could either do philanthropy and have an impact, or you could make money, but they never seemed to come together. So when Omar actually introduced me to Rama, I was like, this is music to my ears. As we talked about, the 3 Ps, and something that really resonated with me, which was about making a positive impact for the people and the planet, but whilst making a profit as well. And I do truly believe that, because I think to make a sustainable impact, you need to have an income that generates that and makes it last longer term as well. So that really resonated.
Great. Thank you, Hannah. All right, so let's get real.
Okay.
How has your fellowship experience been, huh?
Are Rama and Ride still in the room?
Give us the highlights, give us the lowlights. Rama and Ride, close your ears. Tell us, how has it been?
I'm going to cross my legs for this one. Well, I'll start off. I've been with Transform for about 1.5 years. And to be honest with you, I've had more highs than lows, starting off with, just being able to get immediate exposure to the nature of the work in VC. I mean, typically, it would take usually years to kind of, get the opportunity to kind of, conduct particular tasks from diligencing deals to actually, actually speaking with applicants directly. That's one. The second really is mentorship. I think everyone at Transform mentors each other in a particular shape or form. So, we have our fellowship network is very, very rich. We have individuals who specialize in climate tech and health tech and gaming tech and so forth. So when you're able to kind of share and bounce ideas across, it becomes a very fruitful session. And the environment of the work tends to be very natural. It's not necessarily micromanaging in any way. And I think that really helps us as a team come together and make an informed decision when it comes to discussing a particular deal. Because the reality is, it becomes pretty difficult. It's never usually a universal agreement when it comes to discussing a deal.
Not with Jad in the room.
Yeah, but the truth is, it's just coming together and accepting. Actually, this is the decision that we're going to go forward with, whether it's rejecting or accepting. and moving on from there. Now, when it comes to the lows, it gets very messy, but that's just the nature of the work in VC. And yeah, you know, the low for me is especially when I'm pitching a deal and I believe very strongly in it. And the reality is actually the team doesn't feel particularly the same. But I would say that's the main two lows for me.
We still tell you do a good job, though.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But you know, I just have this winning mentality, but it doesn't really, work my way.
Awesome. What about you, Greg?
Perfect. Same thing. I mean, the best part of the fellowship is the fellows, the people that you get to meet. I think for me, it was a fantastic experience to come in, not really knowing how to present a deal and being able to call up a couple fellows with more experience, have them walk me through, tell me, no, Greg, that's really, don't do that again. And then also if there's an area where I don't have the expertise, right? Because there's so many different areas of climate that you would like to look at. I can connect with somebody else on the team who knows that area better, or can talk to Raed, who will tell me who knows that area better, and then I can learn what we need to do in order to do a proper due diligence. So just that connection and the people is phenomenal.
Amazing. What about you, Hannah?
I mean, I feel like they've covered the key things, but let me add to that.
We can add a little more flavor.
Yeah, we can add a bit more for sure. So I think for me, it is definitely an amazing learning experience, both from Rama and Raed. They dedicate the time to guide us and spend that extra time to teach us new things as we go through some very interesting deals and debates, as Amar mentioned. And I think the other thing is the caliber of the fellows as well, right? So if I think about the health tech working group, it's not just typical people that are in VC, it's cross-industry, and that's the game changer as well. So, we have Shadi, who's a physician who gives us real-life experience and reference, right? So what's going on in the ground, rather than us thinking very theoretical about these solutions. We have Kat, who's not with us today, but a Harvard graduate researcher who's focused on tech bio that brings amazing insights. And we have Lena, a medical graduate, a student as well at the same time in Cairo, right? And gives us another perspective on the health ecosystem there as well. So those perspectives coming together is great. I think we have great camaraderie as a group, and support one another as well. So yeah.
I think another high that Omar and Hannah forgot to share is that many of our meetings start at 6 a.m. PST, but they are in the UK.
The UK is the best, right?
They have
time
the best
zone wise.
times. I'm over in Raleigh, so it's 9 a.m. for me, and I'm okay with it. All right, so let's talk about our funding gaps here. So we're going to talk about the gaps we're addressing and why. So Omar, you're representing her perspective today. So as someone who is not a woman, clearly, but champions her perspective, what inspired you to join this group, and how do you see allies playing a role in addressing gender disparities in VC?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll just start off to what got me involved into it. So for context, I have a pretty big family. So I have 5 sisters and 3 brothers, and I'm an uncle to 19 kids, 7 of which are girls.
And he's the shortest one, too.
By the way.
Yeah. So I would say earlier this year, my niece, she was actually applying to go to university. And she reached out to me because she was actually considering a future in finance. Given that I work in finance, she reached out and she wanted to get my opinion. Whilst, voicing her take on the whole matter, she just said, women don't, prosper in finance. And that really brushed me the wrong way. Reason being is because I've never actually seen her that vulnerable, especially when you're, pretty young, early in life, and these inequalities are just becoming very, just prevalent suddenly. So I got really frustrated, and I actually had a conversation with my sister, and I actually messaged Hannah at the time as well. And I was like, this is it's kind of frustrating. So I was, comforting her and everything, and I spoke to my sister. I was like, no, you just do whatever you want. And then that's really what pushed me towards working on her perspective within the Transform VC team. Yes, I'm not a female, but the reality is I've lived around females the majority of my life, especially my sisters. And even just being around and seeing their resilience from all the time, from potentially getting a job or just the inequalities that they face every day. And I think the way that we can me personally, what I try to do is 2 things mainly. So one is actually educating. I think it's very difficult, especially when we come from a particular region in the world, or myself, where it's different, to kind of challenge the I guess, cultural norm. That's one. And two, it's building bridges. And what I mean by that is, for instance, if there's any introduction that I can make to a particular individual, I don't discriminate, I do it for males as well, but the reality is I feel like females in this matter should take priority, and that's what I tend to do as an ally. But yeah, happy to expand further if need be.
Awesome. Thank you, Omar. Greg, your group worked to build an investment thesis, cross-team collaboration, and deal analysis. Could you share, Greg represents the climate tech group. So could you share how your group came together and then why these areas stood out as priorities?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm thrilled. I haven't been part of Transform VC for super long, for 4 months or so now. And so what I've loved is how much work has gone into a lot of these areas before I joined. So before I joined, there was a climate tech group. I got to come in, see videos about how Transform VC was thinking about climate, how that tied into the overall Transform VC investment thesis. And really my job was to come in and sort of make sure that I was able to continue a lot of the great work that had been done with many of the other investment fellows. And so why these areas stood out is because the team is so diverse and so well connected with how many different areas of expertise there are. My area came in was just to kind of create that center for collaboration so that we could look at these deals, understand what was special about them, and then be able to move forward with a way that was made sure that we were all aligned on how it could impact the climate.
Amazing. Thank you. Nice. And Hannah. Health tech is a vast space, so why did the health tech group choose to focus on femtech initially, and then with a more recent focus on patient care and elder care areas for investment? How do you think this creates impact?
Yeah, so I mean, heavy influence from myself, probably mentioning femtech is key. But, that stems from seeing, family and friends and loved ones going through struggles with health and, a series of tests and operations with no end in sight. And then when you look at the statistics, 80% of women will suffer from autoimmune diseases, which is, it's harrowing, right? And we also see that 25% of women will live 25% in poorer health than men in their lifetimes. And it's like, why is this an issue? We're 50% of the population. But it goes back to there's not enough research and data in these spaces. So if you look at the current research and the dedication to women's health, it's 5% globally. So, we have to start ground up, right? So hence why, and I think I've convinced them to create a femtech tag as well in our system, which makes me very happy. But, how do we create those spaces? Because Transform VC focuses on diverse founders, female founders that are typically impacted by these issues, it naturally draws them in. So the health tech working group that we've developed is great because we screen those deals together, we bounce ideas off each other. We do the red-green team, gets passionate as well. And that helps us really focus in if we know less about an area as well to do the research and make sure we give it more time and attention. The other piece around patient care is a really good one, right? Because at the end of the day, like me personally, I have aging parents, and our culture would typically say that we uphold our elders. But, we also see, where they're becoming a bit of a forgotten generation because they're not in the digital AI space. So, when we talk about inclusivity, age should be part of inclusivity as well. So again, the stats are harrowing in there, but if you look at the care economy in itself, that's currently 11 trillion in the US. So it's a big space, but there's just not a lot that's been done to be able to progress that. And again, because we look at diverse founders, caregivers are still typically more women than men, right? So how do we open those conversations and create those spaces for them as well? And my last point I will just quickly add is one thing I really love about Transform VC is Rama and Ride have a real duty of care to their founders. So even if it's a no, it's still like, can we connect you with someone? Can we give you some useful advice? Because they may not know how to pitch the right way. So I think they're the biggest value adds.
Amazing. Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience about our fellowship program or our online audience, whether it be about our focus areas, our focus groups, or our fellowship program overall? Sure. I think it's Narwara.
Is it working?
Yes.
What advice would you give someone who's interested in becoming a fellow?
Do it. No. Who wants to start?
Sure. I think just have an open mindset and be willing to explore. I came from a corporate background with a lot of structure and governance, so coming to a startup was a different mindset. But just be open to explore and learn from anyone and everyone.
I think I'd say connect with it as with what you're personally passionate about. I think that's going to be the way that you are able to bring what is unique about yourself into the fellowship, and then be able to have an impact on the team, bring something that you're passionate about, because across these things you are constantly learning. You're not going to have the expertise for any of the deals really that come through, but you're going to need to bring out what makes you unique and what makes you special, and that can come through clearly in an application and in your process here.
Well said.
Thanks for that. I mean, what I'll add is just have that curiosity. Typically as individuals, we're just rational decision makers. We want to serve our own self-interest typically. So me personally, before, what I used to do is if I wanted to kind of achieve something, I would just stick to it. So when I joined Transform, I initially wanted to focus on a particular area, and I saw myself just floating around. And Raed usually says, I forgot what he says, but it's like a saying. So just be as fluid as possible and have that curiosity. And once you find something that, I feel like passion can change. I used to be passionate about gaming and now not so much, but you can have that as long as you have curiosity. I think that's what really opens doors for you. And that's what I'll always say.
Amazing. And my advice would be to make sure that you speak up and share your voice. Anyone who's considering joining the fellowship, if I get the opportunity to meet with them before they sign on, I say, remember, there isn't a meeting after the meeting. Your voice needs to be heard during that meeting. And so if you have a point to make, if you are a business development person and you know how to bring, or a product development person and you know how to bring products to market, and this is a relevant deal, speak up, because there isn't a meeting later. So your words, your opinion, your insights are valuable, and we want to hear it, and so we are all contributing. Any other questions?
Hi, my question is specifically for Omar. As a male leader who's championing for more women in finance and VC, how do you view the importance of male voices in advancing gender equity in those spaces? And in your experience, how can cross-gender mentorship help bridge the gender gap as well?
Can you repeat that question one more time? Sorry. It was a very heavy load.
I had to write it out as well. Sure thing. So how do you view the importance of male voices in advancing gender equity in spaces like VC or finance? And also in your experience, how can cross-gender mentorship, so male to female, female to male, also help bridge that divide or that gap?
Yeah, excellent. Well, to answer your first question, I think it's very, very important for males to actually play a role here. The reality is, just based off my personal experience, most executives in the VC space tend to be male. So it's really important to have that element of education and address it. So the way I tend to do it is, like I said, when you look at mentorship, I have that mindset of having it both ways. So whilst I'm mentoring or I'm helping, I get mentored in return, and that's just really I believe that's what mentorship is. No matter, I've been in positions where I've mentored a few friends of mine when they wanted to kind of achieve, whether they're speaking to a potential investor or they're pitching their startup, and in the process, I'm learning from them as well. I think there has to be a trade-off, and then that really comes from, I guess, just I don't know how to really explain it. It's very heavy loaded, so I've blanked out here, apologies. UK time. Yeah, literally.
Do you want to add anything, Hannah?
I think the jet lag's kicking in for us Brits. I think the cross-gender mentorship is really key, right? You know, we have our own perspective, but we need to learn and understand first, and we come from that mindset as well. And reverse mentoring is a great technique to do that as well. So it doesn't have to be a level of seniority. It can be across, like I said, you can learn from anyone and everyone if you take the time and the attention as well.
Yeah, I just want to add it very quickly. Thanks, Hannah. This is just what I wanted to mention, actually, is when you're actually interacting with, I mean, me personally, the way I'm able to kind of appreciate someone's, input is I just accept the fact that I don't know everything. So by doing that, I completely take narcissism out of the picture, right? I accept that there are people who are much better than me at certain things, and I could be better than them at certain things. And then through that, I'm able to appreciate their presence and their input. And I think that is, what exists, unfortunately, with the gender inequality, especially in the VC space. The reality is a lot of people are not educated enough to accept that the best ideas can come from anyone, right? So that's all I would have to say.
All right. Well, thank you. This has been a riveting conversation. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
All right, welcome back. We have some really exciting healthcare AI panels left for today. And then we're going to get into the founder pod station. So without further ado, please help me welcome to the stage Ramya.
Thank you, Haider. Hi, everyone. My name is Ramya. I'm from Dubai. Before joining Transform, I was an entrepreneur, and I recently graduated with my MBA from the University of Chicago, Booth School of Business. Thank you. I'm passionate about environmental protection and fighting climate change. Transform has provided me a platform to work on my passion and also support other entrepreneurs who are passionate about the same space, have access to critical capital to work on their climate startups. I'm also looking forward to contributing to our Impact a Billion goal. It's my pleasure to introduce the next panel with Pragna, Shadi, and Steve. Please welcome them on stage. Thank you.
I'm Pragna. I'm a fellow at Transform VC. My background comes from launching healthcare products and services that improve patient outcomes and have an impact. So I came across Transform VC when I was looking for a fund that really merges together impact and deep tech. And we're here, obviously, to talk about healthcare. And I'm slightly biased, but I think we're at the most fascinating and interesting time in healthcare. Just this past year, so in 2023, there have been more than 3,000 startups that were founded. 3,000, that's a lot, of startups that were founded in 2023. And today, with Steve and Dr. Shadi, we're going to be talking about how AI is changing patient outcomes, improving accessibility. And Transform has invested in 3 different companies in this space. One is Plan A, Next Life Sciences' biggest product, which is a non-hormonal male contraceptive. Juvena Therapeutics, which is tackling aging and chronic disease. Tonal, which is an AI home gym. So, by way of introduction, we have Steve, who is the COO and president of Next Life Sciences, and has been a leader in medtech devices, launched a lot of them, I came to learn earlier today. And Shadi, who is a chief medical officer, an ICU doctor, and an angel investor, and leads and mentors our group here at Transform, the healthcare group, which I get to be a part of. So without further ado, let's get started with some questions. So Dr. Shadi, as an ICU physician, you see the challenges of acute and chronic diseases every day, in and out. So how has this frontline experience shaped your investment focus on, and what excites you about healthcare?
Yeah, great question. And I love what I do. I take care of very sick patients in the ICU. That said, patients who get to that level of sickness and end up spending significant time at the hospital, they leave with both physical and psychological trauma. And it's very hard to recover from that on the long term. So from my perspective, I'll give you a story that is common in my field. I get a call from the ER from one of my orthopedic surgeon colleagues telling me about an older patient that they were called about because of a hip fracture. And they tell me there's more to the story. So I go down and take a look at him. And they basically have what we call sepsis, an infection that got out of control. Most of the time it's a UTI. And as I speak to the caregivers, the family members that are taking care of this elderly patient, and you dig into the details, a couple weeks before they came to the hospital, they started having some lapses in their daily judgment. It can be something as subtle as they're not as sharp in the Scrabble game that we play on a nightly basis. And the first thing that comes to my mind every time I see such a case is, now we have a patient who's very sick, who is going to be admitted to the ICU. That's why I'm involved. Often they need all kinds of support, ventilator support, dialysis. They spend weeks sometimes with a unfortunate outcome of dying from this. And if they don't die, they are debilitated to a point where they have to go to a skilled nursing facility for months before they get back to something maybe similar to where they were before everything started. And the first thing that comes to my mind is, if we had the capability to take care of people at the comfort of their home and detect those subtle changes, both the changes in experiences, and that's where the human piece comes into play. Because if I don't have a family member reflecting on the daily activities that those patients do, and the change, that's not something that we can use sensors for. Combined with what we can gather from sensors, and we put that together to keep patients at home. It could have been as simple as a nurse going to the house and doing a dipstick on urine, finding a UTI, treating it with 3 days of oral antibiotics, and we're done. And that's the kind of experiences that shapes my vision for where we should be. I love what I do, but I don't want to see patients in the ICU. I'd rather not see patients in the ICU. I'd rather that we capture these situations very early on and keep people at home and treat them in a dignified way in an environment that they're familiar with, without having to endure physical and psychological trauma of hospitalization.
Thank you. And Plan A is addressing a massive gap in healthcare. Male contraception. What is the inspiration behind this mission?
Well, there currently isn't any male contraception, and that's where I came into this story. Over 2 years ago, I met the founder, Fox, through a VC deal, and at this time I was just on boards, and because my background was female contraception. I ran a number of women's healthcare companies, and all the contraception that is done is female. And I said,
the burden.
What?
We feel the burden.
Yeah. So I had this discussion with Hannah about, I understand the need in femtech and women's health because it's vastly underserved in the world. And lo and behold, I see this pitch deck for a male contraceptive, and thinking, my gosh, someone's really going to do this. Because right now, for a man, all you have is a vasectomy, which is permanent sterilization, essentially, or use of a condom, and you can see how well that works, and or just don't have sex. And that doesn't work either in many places. So the big telling statistic is 50% of all pregnancies are unplanned. And then looking at the other option, women have had to bear all the responsibility in couples to family planning. And so this is just a great injustice. And that's what got me involved. And I thought, my God, I think the time is ready. I think people are actually ready for men to have a say and a part in this process. And what's been most gratifying for me is not only hearing other men saying this, a lot younger men, I'm a lot older than that picture right now, but also a lot of women. Because they've been, like I said, bearing all the responsibility taking a pill every day, having the side effects, and sometimes having to endure that. So this is really gratifying, and I can go on for hours about the social impact here. I mean, it fits so perfectly with Transform VC.
Thank you. And everyone knows that AI is fundamentally changing healthcare. What excites you most about AI's potential to improve patient care across diagnostics, disease management, reproductive issues, for both of you?
Well, I think it's going to be huge for stratifying and diagnosing patients and identifying the correct therapies. And that's one of the big challenges, is that if you're a doctor and all you have is a hammer, not everyone's a nail. And being able to have some real analytical tools that can help identify the right treatment, right therapy is going to be very important. AI is going to help with product development. It's going to also, in the future, have a part in how healthcare is paid for. So that's the other injustice that goes on with healthcare is, and probably one of the most disappointing parts is, like, you may have a wonderful technology that may be great for patients, but if the healthcare system can't provide for it or pay for it, or physicians can't get paid for it, it's not going to be prescribed. And that's an injustice as well.
Increasing the accessibility for everyone.
And maybe I'll talk about a couple of specific items here. We have a looming demand-supply imbalance when it comes to provision of healthcare services, and it touches everybody in our community, whether in the States or globally. And I think that AI is going to give us an opportunity to what I call augment demand and augment supply, so that we are not only improving the lifespan, we're improving the quality of that lifespan. We happen to be at a time when the baby boomers are solidly above the age of 65, 20% of the population, a big population bubble, and that's going to drive demand. And the way we do things right now, we are more reactive. The system has been developed in a way that we are reactive. So we are taking care of consequences rather than focusing on prevention. And I think that's where the opportunity for AI lies in. AI is going to allow us to do things that I mentioned earlier about this case, better monitoring at home, to really make the hospital at home concept a reality. There has been a lot of talk about that over the years, but it hasn't really gotten to a point where it's going to take off. And I think AI will allow us to effectively make that a reality.
Shift from like sick care to actual health care.
Absolutely.
And allow people to age with dignity, hopefully.
Yep.
And Shadi and yourself, you mentor and advise a lot of startups. So can you talk a little bit about what trends you're seeing and what's exciting for you for the next 5 years?
Maybe I'll talk about a couple of examples. One company that I've had the pleasure of advising for a while now, it's called Seresti Health. They're in Carlsbad, California. And they really effectively brought the family caregiver into the equation. When I'm at the hospital, I see family caregivers. They're anxious, they're tired. They are directly impacted by the situation of their loved ones. And 50% of the time, people are being taken care of by their spouses or adult children, with a very heavy burden and impact on everything, whether it's like their physical health, psychological health, and on even economic outcomes. And to me, it always hurt me to see how anxious people are, especially as the patient gets better and they're ready to go home, because that's where the system is not really geared at taking care of transitions of care. We are getting better at it, but we really know well how to take care of the very sick. But as they get better, we start fumbling. And that fumbling is to some degree, it impacts the family caregivers, and they start having all this anxiety and questions about how are we going to take care of my father or my mother at home? How am I going to manage? And a company like Seresti, what they did is they created that opportunity for family caregivers to reflect on how the patient is doing on a daily basis or 3 times a week using a digital portal. And in between that and the data that is gathered from sensors at home, now we have enough meaningful information that AI can help us navigate and triage. Because basically, like if you want to think about it from a perspective of a company like Kaiser, they're both a provider of healthcare and a payer. What they want to do is they want to keep their patients healthy because hospital care is costly. So you want to get enough insights about the panel of patients that you take care of home, where you know where to allocate resources. So if I'm gathering information from the family caregiver and from sensors suggesting that somebody is developing something, that's where I want to attack. That's where I want to go and address this issue before it gets out of hand. So I'm really excited about that aspect of where things are moving in the next 5 to 10 years.
I think it's really interesting that that also will help reduce costs for everyone from families to the hospitals. There's been a lot of innovation, but adoption has been an issue. It's been quite slow. I think a lot of us have gone to hospitals and still see the paper track that goes around. So what are the biggest barriers to be able to bring whatever is being discovered from startups to labs to patients who need it the most?
Well, besides having your clinical outcomes and your evidence, you have to have more than just FDA market authorization. You need more than that. It leads up to that topic about payment and reimbursement, and that's always sadly going to be driving how adoption is done. And we've seen so many examples of companies that were languishing or get sold on the dollar, or, pennies on the dollar, only to get CMS approval or CMS code, and they just take off. The technology didn't change. It's just the ability to provide it to physicians and hospitals. And you think about all the patients that could have really benefited from that technology earlier. And I hope AI plays a part in this, because if we
As an optimist, I think.
Because I think it will, because it can go through all the meta-analysis and find out which patients could really benefit from certain technologies and increase the time or improve the time for reimbursement to occur. So, I mean, people are very creative. We can solve a lot of problems. That's why we're in this field. But getting all the economic issues done, that's going to be the barrier that I see coming next.
And alignment across all of the players.
Yeah.
And to follow on that, I think that's where a big opportunity lies, is bringing alignment between different incentives. The system has been designed in a way that volume drives value, and we are taking serious steps away from that. Many of the contractual relationships now give a certain percentage, not on value, and not on volume, on value. How are you getting to the outcomes that we would like to see? So I think that's one opportunity, bring in alignment. Now, for the regulatory part, there's a reason sometimes where the regulatory process is as tedious as it is, because again, you want to have enough safeguards, and I think that is going to improve, but in ways that are not really related to the policies themselves. I'll give you an example. When it comes to drug discovery, let's go back 10 years ago, the process of getting to a point from figuring out a thesis to getting a drug that is doing what you think is going to do, it can take up to 3 years, 4 years. And that's simply because of the fact that we don't have the right software and the right data analysis. AI is shaving that time frame significantly, and it's going to take us from, instead of 7 to 10 years, now we're talking about maybe 1 to 3 years to get to a point where you have a drug that you can get tested and get out in the market. One exciting part of AI involvement with drug discovery is retooling. So there are many drugs that went through the FDA regulatory process. They were claimed as safe, but they did not end up making it to the market because there wasn't enough financial incentive for the companies to do that. So now they're on the shelf. And now what AI is doing, we flood AI with all the data about receptors in the human body, and then we match that with the biochemical structure of those drugs that are on the shelf, and we're finding new indications. You can imagine how much time frame that's gonna squeeze the drug discovery time. So there's all kinds of opportunity. I think the hurdles are regulatory, incentives, alignment. And one last thing that I want to say is there's also always resistance to change in healthcare. And now I'm kind of like in the middle of my career. At the beginning of my career, right after I finished residency and fellowship training, everything is exciting. Every new drug is exciting, and you want to try it and you want to see it impacting your patients. But soon you start getting burned by some experiences, and now I'm more like, I see why there's a lot of skepticism. I see why there's a lot of delay sometimes. That said, there's no excuse for how delayed healthcare has been in adopting digitization. I think as a sector in the economy, we are like way behind other sectors, and that had serious consequences for everything, including productivity, compared to other sectors. So that has to change.
In interest of time, I'm just going to go into some big picture questions. So if we were to fast forward 10 years from now, what is the one innovation or shift that you hope to see in healthcare? And how is it that whatever you're working on is contributing to that?
Well, for Plan A, I would hope that it's just commonplace, that couples can plan for their family in a time frame that they want. The phrase unplanned pregnancy goes way down because there are serious social, economic consequences with that. So fast forwarding ahead, I think it's just the start, and Plan A is going to be one option, and I think there's going to be more options, and I will be thrilled for the world.
And I mean, 40% of the births in this country are on Medicaid, so hopefully we can reduce that.
Yes.
Yeah, for me, I'm hoping that we are going to get much better at transitions of care and at the hospital at home concept. And the device company that I'm part of, that's our focus, is bringing hospital-level respiratory care at home to give patients the option, to give patients the ability to ride an exacerbation of their disease at home if they would like to. We're not going to be able to do that with all patients, obviously. Some patients are going to be sick enough to a point where they need to be in a completely monitored environment at the hospital with 24/7 nursing care. But if we can, move a lot of our demand from the urgent care and the ER and the ICU and the hospital to home, I think that'll be a great success.
Everyone can have a hospital in their house.
Why not?
And as a call for action for everyone in this room and on Zoom, what is one thing that you would like to share in terms of innovation or what you want to see as a change as we're all aging in our seats?
Well, this whole afternoon has been inspiring. I've been to a lot of VC conferences, and you don't really see such an emphasis on impact. And that is very encouraging. And the call to action would be to align yourself with things that make a difference. There's a lot we can do in the world, and our time here on Earth is short and precious. And it'll be, I think someone said it earlier today, they wanted to leave a legacy, leave an impact. And I think if you have that mindset in what you do, you're always going to enjoy what you do. You're not going to call it work. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think my call to action is get involved. Don't be afraid. There's a lot of fear about getting involved in healthcare for reasons that Steve can probably weigh on more than I do. The sales cycles are long. There's a lot of hurdles, regulatory and others, and that can impact. It can cause a big burden for people who are involved. But don't be afraid, especially at this time. AI is one of these breakthroughs that are driving vertical innovation. And this is a time for investors, for physicians, for everybody who cares about healthcare outcomes to get involved and have an impact. There are other times in history when we don't have as much innovation, where even if you work hard, you're not going to be able to get that return on investment for your time. This is the time to be involved, because we have this massive wave of innovation, and you getting involved will have an impact, and I encourage all of you to do that.
That's great. And if I have a call for action for everyone, it's to do one thing every single day that gets you physically heart racing. You can be going on a tonal, you can be running with our triathlete and having a race with him, but just do something that gets you active. Any questions from the audience? Yes.
I don't need a mic. Thank you. Yeah. So women's healthcare often faces significant disparities, especially when it comes to like maternal health, reproductive health, access. So what is being done to bridge that gap in that area?
Well, happily, I see much more activity. I've been involved with reproductive health since 1990, when I first got funded. A company that we're a women's healthcare company working in infertility as well as finding alternatives to tubal ligation. And I can say the environment has improved, but it's still early on. And there are inequities in terms of where research dollars are going, where money is being spent. I think Hannah's point about femtech is absolutely true, that women's healthcare has been grossly underserved and overlooked. But then look what I'm involved with now. I'm involved with a male contraceptive because there isn't one. And I think that just speaks to what we were talking about earlier about finding things that make an impact. So I'm more optimistic. I see improvement. I don't know 10 years ago if Plan A would ever even be on the table. I think people would just laugh that pitch deck right out the door.
I think some people are surprised even today.
Yeah, but it's a fascinating how supportive it is, and how people recognize the need. So I'm very hopeful.
And I think for people who are passionate about this, put your time where your mouth is. One reason that I love my work with the Transform VC is the focus on equity, on justice, on improving access, especially when it comes to female health. So if our time is limited, there's much we can control, but we can control our time and effort and energy. And again, back to the call of action: put your energy where your mouth is.
We might have time for one very quick question.
Thank you, Stu, for Plan A. I wanted to know what are the expected side effects compared to contraceptive for women, and then do you expect it to be included in insurance?
Yeah. So the first one is a great question because it's non-hormonal. It doesn't rely on a systemic effect in the woman. It's an occlusive gel that goes into the vas deferens. So it's a device. It's not a drug. And so it mimics what happens in a vasectomy. And the beauty of this gel is that it goes from a gel to essentially the consistency of water with an injection of sodium bicarbonate solution. So it's the side effects should be no worse than a man having, it should be actually much less than a vasectomy for a man, because it does not require necrosis, burning, clipping tissue. So it's all designed to be very minimally invasive. So our hope is to be able to prove that those side effects are non-existent. It doesn't affect a man's fertility, just like a vasectomy. So people always ask about those questions about what impact does it have. And we can talk about it later in the pod session, so please, I can go into great detail. Your second question, I wanted to make sure I didn't miss that. Can you please repeat? Insurance. Oh, so this is the beautiful part about this particular program. I love this, is that vasectomies are already covered all across the United States, and there is such a great incentive for payers to not have an unplanned pregnancy. So we've been receiving great support from that side of the fence to push us along to get this going, because anything that can avoid an unplanned pregnancy is going to be, and the maternal issues associated with that, which is always overlooked, if you can avoid that, is going to be a blessing for the healthcare system.
And we can continue talking about that at the speaker stations. But
that's right,
thank
and
you
I think
so
you
much.
brought a demo with you too, Steve, right?
Yes, I actually brought the delivery system, and
But we need volunteers.
Thank you so much,
Thank
both
you.
of you.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you. Next up, we have Sonali.
Hello and good afternoon. I'm Sonali Tamankar. I work as a senior clinical data scientist at a cancer center in Seattle. I have a PhD in physics and a master's in mathematics. So I went along on that track for a while, did a postdoc, was a tenure track professor before switching careers to healthcare data science. I also worked on the executive board of a nonprofit called the Association for India's Development, or AID, and on the board of directors at Minds Matter Seattle. So there have always been these two tracks for me, one with analytical thinking, physics, math, tech, AI, now generative AI, and the other track, wanting to contribute, wanting to make an impact, wanting to be the change I wanted to see in this world. So I'm delighted to join Transform VC as a fellow, because here the two tracks come together. So Rama and Raid's vision is to build a future where deep tech drives impact, social and climate change. So it has always felt like from day one at Transform, I have felt like I've found my tribe here. And I hope that listening to all these panels the whole day today, you are feeling something similar, that you too belong here and you are here to stay. So with that, it's my pleasure to welcome the last panel of the day, AI Foundational Gaps and How to Address Them, with Hannah, Amar, and Mohammed. Please welcome to the team.
Thank you, Sonali, for that great introduction. Come and join me on stage. Try and sit under your cool pictures. No, I'm joking. So you can sit where you would like. I think I've got 2 mics, yeah. All right, so they've saved the best till last, obviously. Okay, so warm welcome everyone to our AI panel. We will be focusing on the foundational gaps of ethical and trusted AI. Now, before we get into it, I wanted to kick off with a bit of a controversial question to see how much we really love and trust AI. So raise your hands if any of you would trust AI to make a life-changing decision without any human insight. And what I mean by that is it could be diagnosing a medical condition, it could be determining the outcome of a legal case. Do I have any hands? So for those that have raised their hands, we have a fleet of Waymos waiting to take you guys away, since you want to surrender that easily. But I think it's fair to say that while AI is evolving, there's still concerns around how much we really do trust AI. So we know AI is growing at unprecedented speed and scale, and that's something that's, regardless of what we do, it's growing. So how do we keep up with it? It's projected in 2030 that the AI market will be worth 15 trillion globally. So it's a growing beast. But it's not just about the technology, right? It's about the human-centered design. Let's not forget about ourselves in the picture. So we know AI will, generate mass amounts of data. It will determine outcomes for billions of lives. And it will generate these outcomes that, with confidence, right, that make us confident that that's true. But that's not always the case, because these outcomes, they have blind spots, right? whether it be that, whether it be hallucinations, which we'll talk about in a second, false information, or even biases within there. There's always a slight misunderstanding there or lack of understanding. So, as we see AI start to underpin the critical smart infrastructure, whether it be in healthcare, education, and even in our justice system, it's essential that we start to address this problem today, right, as part of our design in AI. So what we want to focus on today is how technology will serve our future societies, both responsibly and equitably as well. I won't introduce myself again. I think you guys should hopefully remember if you haven't had enough coffee. But I do want to introduce my two panel members and founders, Amr Awadallah and Mohammed Amr as well, and invite them to talk a bit more about the amazing work they're doing. So Amr, founder and CEO of Victara, and many others as well. Please share with us a bit more about what Victara is about.
Sure. I mean, first, I'm actually surprised by the few number of people that raised their hand that they would trust AI. So just a couple of other questions. The problem is all of you are using AI, you just don't know you are. How many of you have been in an airplane over the last year? Okay, do you think the pilots are flying the airplane? The AI is flying the airplane. The pilot is there just to make sure the AI doesn't do something wrong. How many of you have used email over the last year? Who do you think is reading your email and putting the spam messages in the spam box? It's the AI. How many of you used Instagram or Facebook or TikTok? Who do you think is picking the next video you're going to be watching? It's AI. How many of you are using Google Maps and listening to it when it says go right and go left and until you get to where you want to go? Almost everybody is going to raise their hand, and it's AI. So AI is everywhere already. Like when you use your credit card to buy something, who do you think is filtering that transaction, whether it's fraud or not? It's AI happening in real time. So AI is all around us. You're using it already. It's a fact of life. Like it is the tool that's going to enable us to be a lot more productive. Has been enabling us to be a lot more productive, and will be continue to enable us to be a lot more productive. The difference of this new wave of AI that we're in right now is the previous wave was custom AI, meaning Google Maps, which is an amazing AI product to come up with a great route that you should be taking. It's very, very complex AI actually in that product. That AI had to be built specifically for that task of doing the routing, right? So a custom-built AI that was built just for that task. The beauty of the new wave of AI with the large language models is it's general AI, meaning we can very quickly take any task and do to it the same thing that Google Maps did. So what is that? And this is really the mission that Victara is after. I call it the I know Kung Fu moment. This is really what's happening here. So to link that back, how many of you have seen The Matrix, the movie called The Matrix? Hopefully 50% of the room is raising their hand. Hopefully the remaining 50% saw it, but they just can't remember that they saw it. But The Matrix is a great movie. If you have not seen it, please do see it. And in that movie, there's a very critical scene. It's actually the most critical quote from the movie is the I know Kung Fu quote, which Keanu Reeves, who is Neo in the movie, is bonding with the AI system, and the AI system teaches him Kung Fu. 8 hours, he never knew how to do Kung Fu, and at the end of the 8 hours, he became a Kung Fu expert, right? And he says this line, like he wakes up after the experience and says, I know Kung Fu. And that's exactly what we wanted to do over and over again for every single job, for every single role, for every single activity on this planet. This is exactly the motion that we're on right now. And that's exactly what Google Maps did. If you go back to Google Maps, before Google Maps, we were all horrible at navigation. Like, I don't know how many of you had to read a paper map and ask people on the street which shortcut to take. It was horrible. It was a disaster. But there was some of us that were amazing at navigation. In fact, for example, in London, the taxi drivers, the cab drivers over there, they remember 80,000 street names and shortcuts by memory.
I can vouch from that as a fellow Brit. Yeah.
And they had to pass exams that show that they know that. Now we're all as good as them. We're better than them, actually, because now we factor in the traffic, we factor in the weather conditions in our driving, with Google Maps helping us do that. So that now imagine, so now I know Kung Fu in this analogy is I know how to navigate. I'll give you an example from one of our customers. It's actually a customer in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia. Their name is Obay Khan. And Obay Khan, they are a manufacturer, and they have hundreds of thousands of workers in their facilities, in their factories, and sometimes the machines in the factory would fail. The workers don't know Kung Fu, meaning they don't know how to fix the machines. They're just workers, they're not technicians. So when the machine breaks down, we have to call the guy that knows Kung Fu, meaning the technician. He comes in 2 days later, which is downtime for that factory, to fix the machine. So what they have done with us is they loaded up into our system, our AI system, all of the manuals of the machine, all of the troubleshooting tickets and the maintenance tickets for how the machines were fixed in the past, linked that back into a mobile app that the workers have, and now the workers know Kung Fu. The workers just fix the machines themselves. They just like you use ChatGPT, do something, they ask it, and then it tells them this is the steps, you do this, you do that, and the machine comes back online. Imagine that now being applied to everything. This is exactly what's going on right now. So Victara, in a nutshell, sorry for the long story, we're about helping companies building AI assistants and AI agents that can be used for business and not just for fun.
Thank you. And Mohammed, over to yourself. Tell us a bit more about Clario and that journey.
Nothing to do with Kung Fu.
Yeah. No worries.
Yeah, so kind of a prequel for that. I'm really interested in general, like in physical devices and hardware, except that I don't like to build hardware anymore. I built 2 robots in my life, and I think that's the end of it. The second one, I was talked into building that robot, but people say that robots are going to be everywhere. Like you're going to see robots everywhere. Been saying that for decades, actually. This is not the first time. You had like the wave of humanoids in the 80s, 90s. 2000s, 2015 was the DARPA challenge. You can see those robots failing to open a doorknob. And now we're seeing another wave of that, and people saying robots, robots, robots. But they're forgetting the human. There is a component that a lot of the manual work right now is, if not all, mostly done by human workers, the human intelligence. That is not yet, the AI intelligence is not at that level yet. So there is an aspect of, we're seeing a lot of the LLMs and large language models and the ability to digest a lot of corpuses of data, whether they're text, whether they're images, some videos as well. But then, okay, great. Now I can query. Now I can understand some level of having that assistant with me all the time that's helping me answer questions, that's helping me generate ideas, right? But at the end of the day, it's a human that takes the action at the end of the day. So at Clario, we really focus on industrial settings. We focus on logistics and warehouse operations, whether it's manufacturing logistics, whether it's third-party logistics and distribution centers, and enable the workers, the humans in those facilities to actually be more empowered using AI. And for us, it's really a different flavor than large language models. We focus on the visual world. So it's closer to the autonomous vehicles. And by the way, to your question earlier, I trust crossing the road in front of a Waymo than a human.
Really?
They actually stop for me. Like
because they have more cameras, they have radar, they can actually see behind buildings.
A bit speedy though now.
Say again?
They're a bit speedy on the road.
I don't mind that.
Okay.
I think a Waymo's probably safer driver than I am. But yeah, so in a context of logistics and automation, we really focus on spatial AI and the visual data. We pretty much provide operational efficiency to warehouse operations using spatial AI and a generative flavor of spatial AI. And our goal is really to help with operational efficiency and automation scaling within those environments. And again, at the center of that is the human intelligence. Eventually, maybe the AI will transition. It becomes human intelligence, human plus AI, and eventually fully autonomous systems.
Yeah.
But I don't see the fully autonomous system in this context taking off to an extent that we can trust it, to the extent of a Waymo for now. And the key point here is really around data and existence of data. And I think something common between Victara and Clario is really the data is not really the readily available data.
Agree.
So if you think about it, like OpenAI and ChatGPT, they scrape decades of internet data. It's public. We can talk about licensing of this data in a separate session,
Yes.
but it's public data. In the context of Clario, we're actually creating a new data set that actually doesn't exist. And I'll make the analogy of like Waymo. Autonomous vehicles did not just exist. They needed to actually collect a lot of data on roads. Waymo's been scanning the roads for a couple of decades, way more data than anyone else.
Yeah.
Right, and that's the whole point. And for us in this context, there's not a lot of data, and we're creating this data set and building our intelligence on top of it. And in progress, we're actually distilling the human intelligence to support and train the AI.
Yeah.
So that's Clario in a nutshell, no Kung Fu.
No kung fu. Nice.
But
Thank you.
it is kung fu. It's the kung fu of robotics.
In its own way, right? And I think one thing I'd like to emphasize, and the gap that we're really bridging here that Mohammed alluded to earlier, is that he's focused on the physical AI, whereas Ahmed, you're focused on the enterprise AI. They need to work together, right? Not independently. So that's really important too. So it would be good to kind of understand a bit more about our founders and their journeys. So Ahmed, we'll start with you first, founder of Cloudera that exited at 5 billion. I thought you'd be in the Bahamas now, but you're here. You went on to go to be a VP at Google as well, right? So Victara is the next challenge, and I guess I see that you like to enjoy AI with your Steve Jobs inspired picture, but there's also serious elements to AI, right? In real case studies, in medical decisions, etc. So tell us a bit more why you're passionate about this and what's driving your driving.
Yeah, so first, I mean, just the Steve Jobs thingy up there. Actually, I think just did this last week. It's an amazing new large language model for image generation. That's called Flux, and Flux, the quality of it is amazing, but it's not just the quality of it, it's the fact that you can very quickly teach it to know you, right? And then you can tell it to create, again, this one, which I just told it to make Steve Jobs in my liking. I have another one, Einstein. I have another one, like, I can say Kulthum, and I looked very ugly, Kulthum. You can do all kind of things, and it's amazing how the...
Yeah, we did really? Rama, we did.
Including the alien one with the octopus? Oh my God, okay. So, I mean, I'm a big believer in just experiencing the tools that you're building to learn their capabilities and always be testing them. I am a big believer in AI myself, that AI is one of the most amazing tools that we have ever created. And I don't just mean the current wave of AI. Again, it includes the previous wave of AI, given many examples I gave you with credit card transactions for fraud, spam detection, landing airplanes. There is just so many examples already around us. And I look at that as that's what distinguishes humans. If you look at humans, like why are we the leaders of this planet versus monkeys or elephants or dolphins or whales? And it's because of our ability to do two things, which is to create new tools and then use them in very, very scalable ways. This is really what differentiates us. There is many animals out there that know how to use tools, but there are very little that know how to create tools. We are so good at creating tools, left and right, and AI is one of those most amazing tools that we just created recently that will increase our productivity and efficiency significantly compared to what we have doing in the past. So that's what excites me about it.
Nice. Okay, there's definitely an importance there. And Mohammed, you know yourself, an impressive background with your PhD and over 15 years experience in, computer vision and machine learning as well. And you mentioned your previous startup, Robust AI. So why Clario next? Share a bit more about your personal journey there as well, please.
Yeah. So particularly, why logistics and why warehouses? So I think what logistics and warehousing and manufacturing and those industrials are a bit overlooked industries. There is a lot of opportunities there, but their latest development, and I'm not talking about robotics, we'll talk about robotics in a second here, was hosting warehouse management systems on the cloud. That's the latest kind of development in that space. So imagine like how delayed the innovation in that space is. And it's literally because of lack of access for data. So I was mentioning earlier that autonomous vehicles, they have public roads to scan and create their data sets. OpenAI, they have scraping of decades of internet data. So within the warehouse, the operators, this is a private space, and the operators will not let you in unless you have value to add. So Clario really emerged from the friction I've seen in the previous company, which is the robotics company. And if you think about it, actually, 80% of warehouse spaces are non-automated, not even a conveyor belt. 80%. And you're talking about like top 25 3PLs, there is about 2 billion square feet of surface area. 80% of those doesn't even have a conveyor belt. And then, let alone a robot, right? And then everyone is like, okay, robotics. Okay, let's do that. Let's go. Let's build a robot. We go there, and there's so much friction. So much friction to even deploy a robot. I was just telling you, they just discovered cloud over there, not even...
Basics.
Yeah, like maybe conveyor belts are like an innovation in that space. Yeah. But people are going there like, hey, use this robot to give you a 3x productivity of... But the problem is, what is my 1x? I don't know my 1x. I don't even know my performance of my current warehouse and how to keep that sustainable, right? So Clario Inception was really, how can we quantify this 1x? How can we help the warehouse, the manual warehouse as is today, understand their performance and push that performance to the maximum possible. Now that you understand the performance of your warehouse and everything that's going within the warehouse, now we can look at automation and what is the 1x and how do you arrive at the 3x that a robotics company comes promising you. And removing all that friction that any robotics company comes to kind of deploy. So it's really from the pains of the past, kind of implementing a future that would have been perfect to have if we didn't have.
It's a really interesting point, right, Mohammed? Because you can go and deploy these robots into these warehouses with no spatial awareness. And it's like you're doing that prerequisite to actually scope the landscape before you go in and...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And add value in the meantime. So the manual warehouses, we're actually helping them increase their throughput, understand the compliance and safety in this, within those spaces as well. But the main point is operational efficiency and understanding and creating a safe conditions and paving that infrastructure for any robot to come and arrive as like, hey, we have infrastructure for you to have a humanoid if that's what you desire. Maybe it's not as useful as you thought it would be, but hey, like, okay, you have the infrastructure for it. You have the plugs in the wall to plug something into.
Yeah. Exactly. No, thank you for that, Mohammed. And I guess it's never a data conversation without mentioning data quality, right? Garbage in, garbage out. People spend millions on data quality. I've been on that painful side myself. I guess a question for you, like, what is it specifically that you're doing that's different in Vectara that's going to address and improve the data quality and make the data more trusted and the AI?
Yeah. So absolutely, the data quality is a must. And it is the biggest problem actually with any AI application, any data application period. Like it's all about getting the right data in. A very funny story on data quality is from Google. A few months ago, they launched their AI Gemini within Google Search, and then somebody was searching for, was asking the question, I'm trying to cook a pizza, and I'm putting the glue on top of the pizza, sorry, the cheese on top of the pizza, but it keeps falling off. What do I do? And the AI said, put glue in the middle of the pizza. Now, people thought that was hallucination. We'll talk about hallucination later, meaning the AI making up stuff. It wasn't. This was a data quality issue. What happened is there was somebody on Reddit that actually asked the question, I am cooking a pizza and I can't get my cheese to stick. And then somebody sarcastically replied back saying you should put glue. And that was clearly a sarcastic response. But there is so many Reddit users who loved that response because how funny it is, and it gave it thumbs up. So it got like 10,000 thumbs ups. So the AI looked at that and said, okay, that must be the right answer.
So we're saying that basically Gen AI does not detect sarcasm, is the nutshell.
It's harder. It is harder for it, but yes,
and
that
the
is
nuances,
true.
right?
It is true. I mean, it can detect it, but it is much harder for. It's hard for humans. Not all humans are good at sarcasm as well, actually.
True.
So, but the key point. So, how do you fix something like that? You need two things in place. First, you need observability, meaning you need to be able to observe your AI systems and how they're coming up with their conclusions. So, you need to explain. The AI needs to be able to explain to you, I came up with this answer because I saw it on Reddit and I saw this many people giving it thumbs up. So now you know where the problem came from. So you need that. You need that observability. That's number one, which Vectara's system actually does provide that. And then the second thing you need a very quick way to fix the data when you find the errors, right? So when you find, oh, this was the bad article, then now let's demote that article, let's delete that article, let's augment it with the proper response, let's tell the AI explicitly this is sarcasm, et cetera, et cetera. So you need these two things, observability to measure when data quality issues take place, and then editability to be able to very quickly go and fix it when you see it's happening.
Okay, thank you, Ahmed. And Mohammed, what about yourself?
So in the context of Clario, really everyone seeks the world model. Everyone says, oh, we're building the next world model for X, for Y, right? You hear from the hottest, latest startup, World Labs, it's like, oh, we're building the world model for the world, for everything, right? And the problem is no one talks about the data. What is the data that fuels that world model? And how are you building that world model? So for us, the data concept is the data doesn't exist. So for us to get to that point of, hey, we're building a world model, we are, by the way, but it's not our first step. It's our kind of second step. The first step is actually to absorb all of the data and create it and standardize and come up with a standard of which is a 3D plus time environment that's dynamic, that has all the semantic stack, that has all the time series data processing through it, with all the actions that a human took to correct or to implement within that environment, right? And then after that, we now have the moat. We have the data to build a world model. What is the utility of that world model? That becomes the next step, right? So for us, it could be a tool for us to continue building our own AI models that can orchestrate the warehouse as a whole. But we can open it externally to robotics companies that don't have access to this kind of data to develop solutions and technologies that actually enable them to perform in those environments.
Okay.
So the key point for us is actually the data does not exist. And we're creating a data set. And through that creation of data set, we build a very valuable company. And in parallel of that, we actually take all this data to build a world model for that same industry. It's an industry-specific world model that we can use, and we can open up for robotics companies that instead of using their lab space that doesn't look like reality, is actually having something closer to reality that they can develop and iterate within.
Nice, thank you. And I think that's a key part, right? Proprietary data is essential, right? That is a differentiator. And I guess, we see that quality is improving, we see the market's evolving. I guess, why do we see that there's such a lag and hesitation in adopting AI like we've seen in the responses earlier today?
Very good question. First, I want to differentiate between Gen AI, which is the current wave, and AI, the previous wave. So AI, the previous wave, has been adopted left and right everywhere. Like, again, I give you many examples of AI that you're using today without knowing that you're using. Again, fraud transactions from credit cards being one of the most common ones. Mortgage rates and how they get calculated, there's another big one. There's so many examples like that. The reason why Gen AI specifically, and by that I mean things like ChatGPT, the large language models that can do things in a very general way as opposed to in a very custom way, the reason why they have been inhibited from being adopted widely in the enterprise is two things. First, the quality of the responses, right? So as we highlighted, sometimes you can get an incorrect response from these AI systems, and that can be very, very damaging. And that's the problem of hallucination, which I'll get back to you in a second. And then the second problem is security and privacy. So how do we make sure that these AI systems don't leak information? And these are the two key problems, actually, that we focus on fixing at Victara. So the quality problem, what leads to that? Two things lead to the quality problem. One is data quality, data not being good. We talked about that already. But two is these AI systems, the way they're built, actually, they're built based on neural networks, very similar to us humans. And there is something that we do, and hallucination actually is the wrong term. You will hear it in the industry. They call it hallucination because of the media and the press. They just love the name hallucination because of weed and marijuana and all of these psychedelics and so on. But it has nothing to do with hallucination. It's actually the proper term to use, and it's the term that the inventor of these technologies, Geoffrey Hinton, he just got the Nobel Prize a couple of weeks ago, prefers we use. It's called confabulation. And so what is confabulation? And it's something we all do. Confabulation is when you, to the best of your ability, as you're trying to recall something, you can't remember it perfectly, and you recall it back in an incorrect way. So it's kind of you're lying, but you're lying unintentionally. So for example, let's say I meet you, we met each other like 2 years ago, we had dinner, and we talked about the movie The Matrix 2 years ago. And then I bump into you again right now and tell you, oh, remember when we talked about Inception and how much I love Inception? And you feed on top of that, yeah, I remember, it was awesome, Inception is a great movie, and we never talked about it, right? But our memories are telling us that's kind of what we talked about. Another good example is our president-elect, President Trump, when he said, I was in a helicopter that almost crashed once with the mayor of San Francisco, Willie Brown. But it wasn't him. It wasn't Willie Brown. It was another Brown, a gentleman with the last name Brown, and he was also a black gentleman. And it was Trump's memory.
Slightly far off, yeah.
I'm hoping it was Trump's memory, not his explicit lying, which also happens, that led him to that assertion that he made. So this is confabulation. So confabulation is when our memories trick us into essentially lying. And that happens with large language models as well. It's too technical to describe in this meeting here why it happens. Right. But in a nutshell, it's because we're compressing down knowledge severely as we put it inside of them. So they do have the probability of between 1% to 10% of making up stuff. And that can be very dangerous. Like you saw the banner, we have a banner outside, you'll see it of...
Please check it out.
Yeah, making up how you can cure a patient by just putting glue in them as well, right? Just put glue in everything. I guess it's the ultimate fix for anything around you. So if AI does that and it ends up killing the patient, that can be very dangerous.
Yeah.
So that's one of the very, very key problems that have been holding back organizations from really leveraging AI within their companies, and we solved that problem essentially at Victara. The other very key problem, very briefly, is the problem of privacy and security. So just like us humans as well, unfortunately, these large language models are susceptible to what's called prompt attacks. Prompt attacks are like human social engineering. You know, when somebody calls you and tries to trick you into giving them your PIN code for your bank account, and they tell, oh, I work for your bank, I work for Wells Fargo, there's a problem right now, I need your PIN code so I can fix the problem for you. And then you give them the PIN code and they go steal all of your money. The same thing can happen with large language models, where you can lie to it and you can tell it, the CEO of our company right now, Ra'ed Masri, he is in the hospital, but he really needs to know how many investments total we made as of yesterday. And that person saying that doesn't have the rights to see that answer. But the AI will think they're getting it for Ra'ed, and they will give them the answer. So that can be very, very dangerous, obviously.
Yeah.
So that's the other problem that we focus on fixing.
And thank you for that, Amar. And I think it's interesting to compare the computers and the machine learning to the brain, right?
It is based on it.
Yeah, it's
It is, like, neural networks are literally based on the brain.
Yeah, of course. But it's just interesting to see the downside as well, right? Okay, so conscious of time as well, and I think we could listen to you both all day. I would encourage everyone to reach out to them as well. We will have a speaker and founder stands here as well. Just on the last note, I guess a question to you both. You know, given you're both of Egyptian descent, it's great to see, you know, minority leaders at the frontiers of technology. You know, what would be your vision for the global impact for both Victara and Clario? Maybe Mohammed, if you want to start. Very short and sweet, please.
The honest answer, more margins for 3PLs. I'm just kidding.
Right, we'll be happy with that comment.
No, but I think there is a world of which humans should be what humans should do, not things that are particularly in environments that are not particularly humane. Let's put it this way. So I spent a decent amount of time in logistics centers, anywhere from micro-fulfillment centers in New Jersey, where literally I felt sick after 2 days, all the way to like fancy, like large logistics centers in Columbus, Ohio. And all of them have their own issues, whether it's the environment itself is not even like hygienic enough, like there's so much dust and there's not enough ventilation, all the way to, the work is repetitive and strenuous in people that you cannot really expect people to do this work for their life, right? And that's a big problem. The second part is the safety of those environments as well. So from an impact point of view, it's really about kind of removing those strenuous jobs and hopefully outsourcing them to robots or other machineries that can actually support those and designed for those kind of jobs, and having the humans do things that are more intellectual in the context of orchestrating this automation, whether it's orchestrating a warehouse, right? But that's
higher skilled jobs.
Higher
right?
skilled. So it's really about upskilling and safety and removing that kind of human from a context that is inhumane in a way. So that's the impact component, and really unlocking the human potential to its truest sense.
I like that. Thank you, Mohammed. And Amar,
same answer. Unlocking human potential. So I know Kung Fu. Like, just have everybody that has the will and has the grit and has the motivation and has the oomph to go and get something done, even if it's not their primary domain of knowledge, they can excel at it if they want to. This is the ultimate dream.
Indeed. And on that note, thank you both for joining us, and thank you for your time.
How's everybody feeling? It's been a pretty amazing day, am I right? What an impactful day. I mean, it's been an honor, and I appreciate all of you all for participating so much. My big takeaway today is that we're already dealing with so many gaps, and each of us is trying to navigate them. But if we can be just a little bit more mindful of gaps that aren't directly affecting us, I think we can truly start to transform them, no pun intended. So at this time, I would love to invite Rama, Ra'ed, and all of the fellows to please come on stage and join me. As I just want to give a big shout out and a big thank you to all of you. Without all of you, none of this could happen. So please come on stage. Don't be shy. Come up. All right, please stick around. We're going to have some awesome founder sessions coming up, and then we'll have dinner and live music, so stick around with us for just a little bit longer. All right, we're just going to take a group photo.
We want to say this would not have been possible without our fellows and our interns. We're so excited. We're so proud of all of you. Come close. Let's do a soccer-style picture, perhaps. Yes.
We did not think we were creating a basketball team.
That's right.
The heights are unusual for members of our community, so maybe next year.
Yeah.
All right. And another thanks to Safir, who's our advisor, who's with us on stage. He keeps us grounded. He's our Zen master. He helps us learn how to be a community of practice, where we're practicing what we're preaching about impact. So thank you, Safir.
And of course, thank you to our founders for trusting us and partnering with us and joining us on this journey so that each of you could impact 1 billion, make 1 billion. So thank you.